Welcome and good evening on this Sunday night to the Hopeless Stream. We are live from the dungeons, the somewhat brightly lit dungeons. I've tried what I can do to keep out this late summer, late night light, but there's a bit of it creeping in. But hopefully in an hour or two it'll be all gone and we'll be left here alone together in the dark. Because tonight, we will be streaming horror, pure horror. And this will be horror going back to the early 1980s. So you will see things here from the very start of the sort of horror game genre, the serious horror game genre will be shown here tonight on the Hopeless Stream in Nightmarehouse. And in preparing for this stream, I've been thinking a little bit about that whole genre of horror, because we have played several fantasy games here on the Hopeless Stream previously, and we've also talked extensively about the history of fantasy gaming and when it began, and especially there in the mid-1970s when it really takes off. And horror is a bit of a different story. And I think, to me, the genre of horror always had a special place in my heart. I was actually always more drawn to horror than I was to fantasy as a kid. It was as if the way that horror works in that it externalizes a feeling of despair and being lost and being confused and existing without knowing your purpose, where you're going, what you're trying to do. Everything about that is something that horror gives a shape to your anxieties, to your fears, to your doubts. And I guess that says something about me growing up as a fearful child in under the constant threat of a nuclear winter, being drawn to horror, like a way of actually expressing all these emotions that you were supposed to just keep a lid on and pretend that everything was normal here in the world. I mean, bombs were dropping on the TV and people were getting shot and the newspapers had horrible headlines and we would die from this or we would die from that and the catastrophe was just around the corner. But still, you had to get up in the morning, eat your cereal, go to school, learn math, pretend like everything is gonna be fine. And for me, it was not fine pretending for everything to be fine. And I think one of the outlets that I found was horror. Just exposing myself to these horrible imaginings and expressing myself through horror was a really important thing. So it's a genre that's sort of very near and dear to me. And one of the problems with the genre, to me, has always been that horror always seems to be kind of tongue in the cheek. There's also, very often, there's an element of slapstick, as if you really showed pure horror, people wouldn't like it. People wouldn't go to the cinema if the characters in the horror movies didn't crack a joke once in a while. And I get that from a marketing strategic perspective, which I despise. But I think that horror is absolutely best when it is not ironic, when it is not tongue-in-cheek, when it takes itself as seriously as can be, and when it really, really puts you face to face with the horror of existence, expressed however way the designer or author wants to express it, but really with just nothing between you and the horror, no time for jokes. You cannot giggle this thing off, because you can't, right? I mean, I know it's the pretty much the only way that you're going to continue here in life when you're watching the news and being confronted with this constant nightmarish existence that surrounds us and the suffering and the pain and the terror and the anxiety. You're kind of supposed to find mechanism to shrug it off and say, well, there's nothing we can do about it, so let's just go on a merry day. So that was really never an answer that satisfied me. So I'm very, very happy that the game that we'll be playing tonight is one of the very first horror games to take itself seriously. And while the genre of fantasy gaming kicked off in the mid-70s, the genre of horror was a little bit slower to really get going. I mean, there are early examples, but it is really only there in the early 1980s that we start seeing horror game coming into its own as a genre. And I'm going to do a little bit of a deep dive here on the history of horror gaming, just to contextualize what it is that we'll be doing. But before I do that, let me just make sure that you know kind of what's on the table here, because this is Nightmarehouse, designed by David Marshall in 1983, and it was published in the 15th edition of the Ares magazine, which looks like this. Yeah, put it over here. So this is the Ares magazine. We previously here on the stream played Citadel of Blood, another Ares magazine games, and Ares magazine was this magazine that came out in the early 80s. It was originally published by SPI, Simulation Publications Incorporated, what a name. And then later it was taken over by TSR, Tactical Studies Rules, and yet again, what a name. And there's been a lot of griping about what happened after TSR. They took over SBI and continued the Ares magazine for really just a few numbers more before they just, buried it and moved all the material from the Ares magazines into their own Dragon magazine. And some people will complain that the quality of the magazine, it fell drastically after it was taken over by TSR. And Nightmarehouse is from that period. I think TSR took over the magazine around number 12, and Nightmarehouse is number 15, and the last number of the magazine is number 17. So we are kind of at the death throes of the Ares magazine here. And some people blame specifically the rules of Nightmarehouse, like the horrible, horrible rules of Nightmarehouse that I'll be talking a lot more about later. Blame them on TSR, not getting their act together, not being seriously invested in the magazine, and actually printing in the magazine a kind of a first draft of the rules. Like it was, someone wrote a draft of the rules and they just published them, and it's a nightmare. Anyway, cheers to you all. I hope that you're gonna hang out with me here for the next X number of hours to play Nightmarehouse, and that if you're sitting there at home with the Sunday scaries, Mondays coming up, that this will relieve you from your anxiety as it relieved me from my anxiety when I was a kid. Cheers. So let's look a little bit at some of these early horror games. I was, of course, felt compelled to dive into the history of horror games. See, when do these things actually start? And I was kind of looking for really early examples of horror games still in the modern era, but early examples of horror games. And I've compiled a few images for you that I'm going to show with you. And the first image that I'm going to show is an image of probably one of the very first horror games to come out. It is from 1889. So that's, what is that, 135 years ago or something like that. Released by the Parker brothers in 1889. And let me just see if I can get you aboard with this. Yes, so I hope that you can follow along here. So what you see here is a couple of pages from the Parker Brothers marketing magazine from 1889, where they list all the wonderful games that you can buy from Parker Brothers. And if you look on the right side of the page, you can see you can buy such games, The Yankee Peddler and My Wife and I. What cherry games. But then on the left side, there is an ad for Ye Witchcraft Game. And now, it's very small on the screen that I am watching here. Perhaps you can read at home. But in case you cannot read at home, let me just read a small excerpt from the description of Ye Witchcraft Game by Parker Brothers, 1889. It says there in the text, "The object of the players is in emulation of the good old spirit of 1692 to capture as many witches and their able assistants, the Black Cats, as possible." So they are basically, it's a card game, right? And they're basically putting the players on the side of the witch hunters, and the goal is to capture as many witches as possible, because we know, of course, that these witches were real witches and they deserve to be captured and tortured and burned and killed and defamed and have their families torn apart. So naturally the players are on the side of the witch hunters, and also notice the framing, the emulation of the good old spirit of 1692. It's such a cheery game, and I'm happy to report that even though in today's ears this sounds supremely insensitive, that the game was actually discontinued after a few years for being too controversial. So there you have it. Even in 1889, there were forces who felt that maybe stepping into the shoes of a witch hunter and burning witches wasn't, such a great theme for a game. So I don't know the particulars of why it was withdrawn. All I know is that it's said that it was because of sensitivity issues. And that is also one of the reasons that we know very little about this game today. I haven't been able to find a copy anywhere, so I can basically only show you the card there on the left page. This is one of the cards from the game where you play as the good old witch hunters. So this was Parker Brothers in 1889, and as you can see, not a very successful story, and it was very much a tongue-in-cheek game, of course. It was supposed to be an innocent card game, but someone probably felt that it was going a little bit too far in its theme. Now, up through the 20th century, we have several horror games coming out, and most of them are kind of games, that are based on popular movies and franchises like Frankenstein games or Dracula games or these kind of things. And they're all like commercial games, very cheap, very poorly done, and just, basically throwaway games. So certainly not games that would take themselves seriously. But I do want to look at a few examples just to give you an idea of how they actually looked. And one of them here is the Addams Family game. You remember the TV series, The Addams Family, which launched in the 60s and was rather unsuccessful and was discontinued after, I think, just a season or two. And then only it had its revival in the 80s or 90s, I believe. I remember in the 90s, Addams Family was a completely household name. Everyone knew the Addams Family series. But of course, the later versions of it, I guess. Now, this game came out in 1964, and it really belongs to that whole genre, sort of cheap games made off television shows or other franchises. And you can see here, if you look at the game board, that it's really just a roll and move game where you have the different characters, and each character follows their own track, and you roll dice and you move your pawns, and you can land on spaces and draw cards that can give you a plus or a minus. It's like a simple roll and move game, nothing really too interesting about it. And it's from 1964. So, and at this time there is nothing horror that takes itself seriously, and there's no fantasy, remember, yet either, to sort of any extent that is worth mentioning. So it is only when we go a little further. Oh yeah, I have this example as well from 1970. So this is 6 years later, and I chose this example because I think many of you may actually know it. And I can see Swordvander, he says that the Addams Family house is almost identical to the house on the cover of Nightmarehouse. Okay, let me just scroll back for a minute and see. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Perhaps this is just like the generic haunted mansion look. I think we will see several examples of exactly this aesthetic when we talk about horror games. But yeah, that's absolutely right. So Haunted House, it came out in 1970. It was originally called Witch Witch, meaning, witch. How do you explain that? So witch as in witch of several, and witch as in female sorcerer or wizard. So witch, and I guess because it sounds silly and it's difficult to actually hear exactly what it means, this game was quickly changed to Haunted House. And this is a game that I grew up playing, not in the Haunted House version as you see here. This is the original cover of this one from 1971. But I grew up with a later cover that was popular in the 80s when it was called Ghost Castle in English. I played it in Danish as Spøgelseslottet. And this was a favorite game because it had this element of a mechanism. There is the tower in the center, and the game board is partitioned into 4 quadrants. And then you drop a skull down the top of the tower, and it rolls out in one of 4 directions, and something happens on one of the quadrants. So maybe an axe comes down and chops one of the character, or the skull rolls down a set of stairs and tumbles over a character. And if your character is knocked out by one of these effects, it has to go back to the latest save point that it was on. So this was a very random but really fun game as a kid, of course, because of this mechanism with the skull. And unfortunately, I don't have the game anymore, but I actually wish that I had kept it because I would like to give it a spin again. So now I'll probably have to go find it somewhere on the used games market. I don't know what it's priced at, but probably not that expensive. I think it was a very popular game at the time. I don't know if any of you out there following the stream have experiences of playing this game or remember it, or perhaps just remember the cover. It was released in many languages in many different countries. But again, of course, just a fun, non-serious horror game with a bit of spooky effects from 1970, but really a smash hit that continued to be popular for several decades after it was created. Now, if we move into 1981, that's 10 years later, we have here TSR, which also released Nightmarehouse that we're playing tonight, and TSR put out a game in 1981 called Vampire. And you can kind of see from the cover, it looks a little bit silly. And it is also a little bit silly. But I think at least it's an attempt at moving in a direction of something where everything is not just about cracking joke. And it's an interesting game in that it presents itself as a children's game, and it is really just a roll and move game, but it has elements that clearly shows that the TSR designers were war game designers, because the game is really played in 2 phases. And the first phase, the board game, looks like this. So it's a real sort of classical hexagonal war game look, of course, kind of cartoonish. So it's telling you that it's not taking itself too seriously, but still, hexagons. To me, hexagons, that's always serious. Like, you don't have light hexagonal games. This has all this feel of, oh my God, there's gonna be little dice cut counters with numbers on them for movement and defense and attack and morale and you know not what. This is not as complicated as that, but you start actually by traveling around Transylvania, and the players are, it's kind of a semi-co-op game, I guess, where the players are trying to find Dracula and kill him, and whoever does so wins the game. So it's a kind of a race to be the one who goes down in history as the guy who took out Dracula. So, yeah, that's kind of what you can win. I guess if you don't win, it's okay if someone else takes out Dracula, unless it's very important for you to have sort of your name stamped on the diploma saying that it was me who killed Dracula. But yeah, there you go. So on this first map, there will be, I think, 3 coffins around the map, and the players have to go around and find these coffins, and then they have to destroy all the coffins, because that's where Dracula is hibernating. So if you can get rid of the coffins, he has nowhere to go outside his castle, and that can sort of limit his sphere of operations. So once you have found these coffins and destroyed them, the game changes and moves on to a different map, which is now a more sort of a tactical zoomed-in map of Dracula's castle. And the players are all going to be there, and they're going to move around this house, and they're going to search through the different rooms, finding different obstacles and objects that can help them along their way and so on, until eventually they're going to face off with Dracula, and someone's going to, drive a stake through his heart, and that's going to be it. So a lighthearted roll and move game which suddenly starts to have like elements of modern wargaming in it. And I think that's significant because that is part of what is elevating horror into these light children's game, from these light children's game into something that takes itself a little more seriously. And this is from 1981. So in 1983, which is the year Nightmarehouse came out that we're playing tonight, we also saw the release of Dawn of the Dead. I don't know. I included it. I guess it's not strictly a horror game. It's like a zombie game, and zombies always have that, again, quality. I mean, early zombie movies like George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead series, of which Dawn of the Dead is part. And Night of the Living Dead was very much a sort of political comment, political satire. So it had those aspirations that the genre could work as an allegory of something political in the outside world. It was a prism through which to look at the world outside the movie. I think when we come to Dawn of the Dead, everything has gotten pretty silly. Dawn of the Dead is the one that takes place in a shopping mall. Already there, it's so American. A shopping mall in the early 1980s in America, and a lot of zombies, and there you have the perfect setting for your movie, I guess. But anyway, I included it because it's still in the horror genre, I feel, and there are really very, very few games in this period, in the early 80s, that are horror games. So it is an example of a very early game, and when I show you the map now, you can again see the influence of modern hobby wargaming on this genre. So all these squares with numbers in them, and you can just imagine all the little chits and counters that's going to come in there. Zombies, characters, items. You can move around, you can search, you can pick up weapons, you can have modifiers, you can throw dice and look at critical hit tables, and you can take out zombies or be taken out by zombies. And the game is notorious for being extremely difficult, and I've seen several people complain that it's impossible and that the math doesn't add up and you just cannot win. And then there are other people who suggest strategies. It's just because you need to learn the strategy of how properly to fight zombies, and if you learn those strategies, you can actually win the game. I don't know. It's supposed to be really, really hard. I'd like to get my hand on a copy and give it a swing. I think it looks intriguing, but it also looks wargaming. So this is kind of, again, perhaps a step even further, or certainly a step even further, I would say, from Vampire into a more sort of strategic wargaming territory in 1983. And it is really only a few years later that I'll say that we start having games that really take themselves seriously as horror games. And all that stems from role-playing, I would argue. Just as fantasy wargaming was really an attempt at getting a share of the market who are now into fantasy role-playing by transplanting that fantasy theme from the role-playing games to the board games. The same thing was what was about to happen with horror board games. And the reason that it took a little longer is probably that the first horror role-playing game to come out was like 7 years after the first fantasy role-playing game. So Dungeons and Dragons comes out in 1974, and in 1981, Chaosium, which has previously released the RuneQuest role-playing game set in the world of Glorantha, which was also the world in which arguably the first real fantasy war game, Red Bear, White Moon, was set. Chaosium releases in 1981 the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. And I always love to show off my copy of this game. This is the 4th edition. So the 1st edition is from, you cannot, of course, see my overhead cam, so I have to do like this. There you have it, Call of Cthulhu. This is the 1989 4th edition. So, I mean, that speaks for itself, right? 8 years after the game is out, the 1st edition is out, we're already at 4th edition. This was a hugely popular role-playing game, and I was completely smitten by it myself. And that was a game that certainly took itself very seriously. There were no jokes involved here. Everything was just horrible. It was cosmic horror without a glint in the eye. And this was way before we started to have this whole Lovecraft Twice Removed movement where it's just about monster bashing. This is really from the time where cosmic horror was about cosmic horror. And I can see here that Swordvander says in the chat, zombies definitely feels like an American invention, although all the good zombie films are from Italy. Yeah, that's a really good point, right? We have all these wonderful zombie movies from Italy, and then we have this sort of larger-than-life zombie movies in the US where everything has to be... I don't know. I mean, the Italian zombie movies... I'm not sure, but I imagine that they are more interested just in the genre and exploring the ideas of zombies, whereas the Americans seem to be very intent on using it for social commentary. I mean, zombies in a shopping mall, it's so blunt that everyone will be able to understand the metaphor here, right? And it's as if like Night of the Living Dead wasn't like direct enough, then Dawn of the Dead must be the most direct of all these zombie movies. And I remember if you watch Christiane F., the old German movie about drug abuse and what that can lead to, this fantastic movie, Kinder auf Bahnhof Zoo. I don't know what the English title is. Perhaps it's just Christiane F. I don't know. But it takes place in Berlin, and it's about a girl who gets into drugs and her life just completely derails, and it's based on a true story. But they're at a nightclub, and there's a cinema in the nightclub, and the movie that is being shown in the nightclub is Night of the Living Dead. And again, you can see this is an interesting move where you have Night of the Living Dead made as a social commentary in the US and suddenly appears in this German movie like 15 years later as a comment on drug abuse and drug addiction. So zombie movies seems to be popular as allegories. But yeah, it would be interesting to take a look at some of those early Italian zombie movies and see what do they actually have to say, if anything, about society. So anyway, I was talking about the Call of Cthulhu, and interestingly, in the Call of Cthulhu 4th edition here, there is a scenario which is the first scenario of several in the book, and let me just try to find it. It's just called Haunted House, and that pretty much sets the tone for so many horror games to come, Nightmarehouse included. So here in 1981, we have of course, I'm sitting with the 1989 edition of Call of Cthulhu, so somebody may have to correct me, but I do believe that the Haunted House is the original scenario that was also in the first edition of Call of Cthulhu. If not, my argument completely falls apart and I will walk away in shame. But I'll do that in the comments later when the video is out on YouTube. So this is basically just a 3-page scenario with a floor plan of a house. It's a little difficult for you to see. It doesn't matter. So it's just 3 pages of text and a floor plan, and that's all. And it's a haunted house, and it's basically some real estate agent who is really tired. He wants to sell the house, but it's kind of haunted, and the last person who lived there came to like a bad end. So he wants the player investigators to come and find out what's going on with this house and cleanse it of any evil spirits that may lurk there. And there's so little in it, but it was the first Call of Cthulhu role-playing scenario that I ever played, and I was game mastering it, and I had 2 players, my brother and my cousin, and we spent half a night playing this scenario. We probably played for like 6 hours, and literally it's a floor plan of a haunted house and sort of a few notes on the background and the history of it. But we were so immersed, and I remember preparing for this scenario. I was just a kid and thinking like there's nothing in it. Like they're just gonna run through this house and find the ghost, and then that's gonna be it. It's gonna be super boring. But I set it up and we tried to do it, And it was so scary playing it. Just when we started describing the place, the characters, the realism in the game, and how fragile people were, and if even like when you heard like a bad rumor, how it sort of got into your brain like a little bug that was tearing away at your sanity, opening up for these vistas on some kind of larger cosmic horrors around you. It was really, really something. And it was just 3 kids in a room, just their imaginations going wild over these 3 pages of text in this book. And it got to the point that when we were trying to get to the climax of the story and the characters have to go down the basement and you have to make a dexterity throw. I remember this very vividly. You have to make a dexterity throw to see if you kind of slip on the steps going down into the basement. And at that point, we were so frightened. The characters were, the players were so frightened, but I was frightened too, even though I was telling the story and was kind of in control and knew what was coming. But I was just afraid of going where the story told me to go. So I remember my cousin failing his dexterity throw, and I kind of tried to introduce an element of slapstick of how he slipped on these stairs. And just like he bumped down the stairs on his ass or something and fell on his face, and tried to make it a little funny. But I also remember how completely flat my joke fell, and that nothing could really dispel the sense of horror that we were in at the time. So even if we'd wanted to come out and try to slapstick our way through the ending, it was just not possible. And after, having played for 5 or 6 hours and having this really dramatic, horrifying climax to the game, I was just completely sold on Call of Cthulhu, on horror. Finally, I'd found something that took itself seriously and that expressed everything that I felt was wrong with the universe in a way that made me a completely helpless witness to the ongoing march of the suffering of civilization and mankind. And that was exactly how I felt every night when I was watching the news in telly. So this game completely gave me a voice as a kid. And it also gave voice to a lot of the games that came later. And the next game that I want to show you, therefore, is also... this is the keep. Let me just skip this for a moment. And this... Oh, my God, I put more games in here than I even remember. I'm going to skip these. I want to go to this game, Arkham Horror, because this game came out in 1987, and it was made by Sandy Peterson and a couple of other guys, Lynn Willis and Charlie Crank. And it was not made by Sandy Peterson, apparently. Well, anyway, Lynn Willis was a author of Call of Cthulhu scenarios for sure. The others probably also were. But anyway, it was the Call of Cthulhu franchise, and they made it into a board game. And because it came from the role-playing game, it again had that sense of, let's try to make this for real. Of course, it's a board game. It doesn't even scratch the surface of what the role-playing game did. But they did actually try to inject some kind of seriousness into it. That may not be so apparent when you look at the map here, which is another roll and move map. And you are playing, it's a collaborative game. You're playing as investigators, as if it was a role-playing scenario, and you're running around Arkham, and you're trying to shut down all these gates through which the various cosmic horrors are creeping into the world. And perhaps I should retract a little bit, because while it's true that the game draws on the whole background of the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, it's perhaps also, when I look at it now and think about it now, right in this moment, here where you first start seeing the cosmic horrors becoming physical beings to a much larger extent than it is in the role-playing game. In the role-playing game, it's always the knowledge that there is something out there, something unfathomable out there. That is really what you're up against. It's not so much the physical thing itself. Whereas, probably because it was a board game and you needed some kind of more tangible opponent, the Arkham Horror board game from 1987 that you're looking at here started introducing all these monsters that you had to fight. There was also a lot of story. You would walk around, you get snippets of story, and it it was immersive to that effect, but maybe this is actually where things start taking a wrong turn, in my opinion, and the whole Lovecraftian horror scene becomes this very sort of visible, tangible, just, another monster lurking somewhere around the corner, and getting away from that more psychological horror which lies at the root of it. But certainly Arkham Horror is one of the best known horror games today, especially because it was picked up later and remade. I don't remember if it was Fantasy Flight Games who first picked it up or if it was someone else, but it came out in several editions, a huge game with numerous expansions and a huge following, and one of the most successful horror board games of all times. And I think the only there are a couple of other games who might also compete for that throne of being sort of the most successful horror game of all time, but Arkham Horror is certainly the first of them to come out. The ones that I just skipped before was Chill here, based on another role-playing game called Chill. Chill, the role-playing game, came out in 1984, and Chill, the board game, came out just the year after, 1985. It was a bit of a flop. I remember playing it as a kid, and yeah, it had some heart, and it was actually trying to take itself seriously, but it kind of failed by being a little too cartoonish and sort of a little too random. So it was hard to really immerse yourself in it. And going back to the ones that I also skipped, the other one, The Keep, another game from 1983, which was based on the movie of the same name by Michael Mann, like a movie that flopped pretty big, and so did the game. It's not known to be a very good game. Again, I included it because it's an early game that plays around with themes of horror. And here you have the map, and again you see some kind of influence from it looks even more like an abstract game than a modern war game. I don't know. I haven't tried it. It sounds as if there might be some fun to be had from it, like the positional gameplay in it, but it's certainly not an immersive horror game by any stretch of the imagination. So let's scoop back these and then just end this little review of early horror board games by mentioning the 2004 classic Betrayal at House on the Hill. It's of course much later, but it's just, another game in that whole series of games that looks at haunted houses and put players in the shoes of investigators going into these houses and having their horrible experiences and somehow trying to defeat an evil entity. And Betrayal at House on the Hill is famous for introducing a traitor mechanism, which basically means that the game begins with all the players collaborating on defeating the entity in the house, but at some point in the game, one of the players will turn and start to work against the other players and try to stop them from destroying the evil that is haunting the house. Another supremely famous game, and another one of those games that'll compete for the title of the most well-known horror board game. There is one more, which I'll return to a little later perhaps in the stream, but I think I've talked a lot now about early horror games, so I hope you find it just somewhat interesting, because for me it's really interesting to see this evolution of the games and when they move from sort of the jokish into the more serious, and also how they tackle this idea of representing horror in games, because board games have a really hard time communicating true feelings of horror to the players. And I don't really know of any horror game that does that very effectively. There's some that come close perhaps, but board games are just not a good medium, I think, for really making people scared. You can do it, of course, in role-playing games like Call of Cthulhu, like the story I told you before, how scared out of our mind we were as kids playing Call of Cthulhu, the role-playing game. And that was never found in the board games, which was also, I guess, why there was always this sense of letdown, like I got Chill, for example, and wanted it to be a great horror game, and it was just like it kind of fell flat. And we said like, no, we just need to play more Call of Cthulhu role playing. These board games are just not cutting it. So yeah, so that's it. So let's go back to our table here, and let's take a look at chat. I can see here that Swordvanda writes, Evil Dead 2 is basically a remake of Evil Dead 1, but it completely undercuts the horror that worked so well in the first film by introducing slapstick and silliness. So yeah, to me, there is only Evil Dead 1. And don't get me started on Evil Dead 3. Yeah, I completely agree here, and it's a really good example, because again, it shows how you can do horror right, if by right you mean something that really accepts the premise of the genre, saying, well, the people in the movie or in the game, they have to be just as scared as if this happened in real life. And what is so, non-convincing in these kind of slapstick horror things is that, people are face to face with the innermost horror at the center of the universe, and still they're like cracking jokes and giving high fives and saying stupid one-liners, and it's unbearable. I just can't watch that shit. It's unbearable. And yeah. So yeah, Evil Dead 1, and from there on, just don't watch the crap. Just don't watch it. That's where I stand as well. I know there are many people who love it, and again, I kind of understand that. I think I am in a sort of more marginalized position here. I think most people actually like their horror with a bit of a joke attached to it, but I don't care for that at all. So that's not my jam. Yeah, and then we have another. Laura Ray 22 says, to make the players feeling actual fear is a work of art. Very much. And as I said, I think it's possible in role-playing games, but I think it is really, really difficult to achieve in horror games. So if you have any examples of games you feel do that, or perhaps just come close to doing that, please post them in chat. I would love to have some more examples of that. Right. So now, before we begin playing this game, let me tell you a little bit about the background and a little bit about what you're looking at here on screen. And then we can slowly get started. And let me also preface this by saying that this is potentially like a very sort of long and dragging game. So my intention here is not really to do a full playthrough in very close accordance to every single rule in the game. It's more to give you a feel of how the game works, and particularly to talk about what are some of the ideas in this game, because I think this is a game that is very ambitious. It has a lot of heart. It's really trying to push the envelope on what games can do, and it also, in many respects, fails miserably. But I think, as always on this stream where we play so many hopeless games, we are sort of not afraid of taking on these games, because we don't play them because they're perfect. If they're perfect, there's no point for us really to stream them. We're more interested in the games that have jarring edges, and this certainly has a lot of jarring edges. So what I want to do is to show you some of the things that the game can do, and perhaps some of the ideas that gets lost on the cutting floor, because what happens when games like these fails, and Nightmarehouse really did fail, it was never a popular game, it means that people don't revisit it and people don't learn from it. And there are ideas in this game that could be developed further. And sometimes these ideas then linger for decades before someone finally picks up an old game and discovers that there are interesting mechanics, and maybe if they just rework them, they can put them into a new game and it becomes a huge success, and everybody praises them for having, made this great new discovery and invented this great new mechanic that has never before been seen in games. But of course, they borrowed the mechanic from like a 40-year-old game that they just found at a flea market somewhere. So, and that's all good. But guys, go back in gaming history and start picking out some of those ideas. No reason to reinvent the wheel every time. There's so many things, so many underdeveloped great ideas out there in the early games. And Nightmarehouse is definitely included in this category. So what you're looking at here on the left side of the board is the Darkholm Manor. Now, this is an old Gothic style manor from the, let's say, mid-19th century. And it was built by an eccentric guy called Josiah Darkholm, who went to the East and he dabbled in the mysteries of the East back in the 19th century, when people in Europe or the US didn't know too much about what was going on in places like India and China and other parts of Asia. But some people became very fascinated about especially ideas that they saw as deeply occult and mystical. That is what the whole theosophical movement started by Madame Blavatsky and this American colonel. That's all about, really taking all this old Indian mystical knowledge and repackaging it and selling it as a complete and very incoherent system. So Josiah, he'd gone to the East and he came back and he delved too deep into these mysteries, and he built this house according to the tenets of what he had discovered. And therefore the house is kind of confusing. It's big, it has angles that keep changing, it's full of secret doors and passageways, and it is also the locus of a very strong spiritual energy that is manifesting, and an energy that is, at least in the perspective of human beings, sort of dark and disruptive. So Josiah built the house, and over the next several generations, Josiah and his children and their children, everyone went insane. They killed themselves, they hung themselves, they drowned themselves, they slit their own throats, they did horrible things to themselves. So it seemed like the house was possessed by this entity that was driving people mad. And part of it was that this power was unleashed in the house. So because the house was built in this very specific spot on the hill where there was a specific surge of energy from the underground that connected it directly to these deep spiritual mysteries, it had a sense that the whole house seemed to be alive, and the house really seemed to be affecting the psyche of people who were in the house. And now we are probably in the 1930s, let's say, and this house has been abandoned for a couple of decades. And the only person left from the Darkholm family is Kate Darkholm. And she had 6 siblings and a mother, of course. And her mother, she drowned herself in a nearby lake. And after that, all the kids were taken away by social authorities and moved out of the house to other places spread around the country. And all of them, except Kate, died within a year of leaving the house, cursed. But there was something in Kate, perhaps some kind of closer connection to the source, that made her survive and grow to be an adult and develop these really fantastical psychic abilities. And what is happening at this point in the story, after she has not been in this house for a couple of decades, is that there is a journalist from the New York Times, Mr. Tim Holt. And Tim Holt is a photojournalist, and he has a story about this house. He grew up in the village close by the house, and he remembered it growing up like something that you would shun, and sometimes as kids they would go up there next to the house and they would dare each other to climb the fence and go into the garden and make a sneak peek in through one of the windows. But there was an intense sense of dread associated with it. And since he later grew up and moved to the big city and became a photojournalist, he's always been attracted to photographing these old abandoned places, and has also developed a knack for spirit photography. So that is taking photos of old places and then looking at the details of the photos, trying to zoom in on particular details to find out if there are any kind of metaphysical presences in the photos when you develop them. So in his main project, now that he's this middle-aged photojournalist and he wants to do something that's truly meaningful, so he wants to return to his roots, to his childhood village, and he wants to photograph this house. But he doesn't just want to do it alone. He wants someone who can contact this house and who can really interact with this house, and not just him and a camera. So he reaches out to Kate, that he also knew briefly before she was taken away from the house at a very early age. And he contacts her, and she is now a rather popular spiritual medium. And he presents this idea to her that, maybe they could go back to her childhood home and he could do a photo series of it and tell her a story and also give her a chance to get in contact with the house and live through her old memories or find out what the presence in the house is, and perhaps even, in the best of worlds, purge the house of the darkness and the evil that seems to inhabit it. And of course, this is a month-long conversation before Kate, she finally agrees to it. But I think, like Tim, she probably has a feeling that now she has succeeded in her life goals, basically, so she wants to do something that is more meaningful, and that is to set her own personal record straight and find out what was it that drove her mother to suicide, and that basically drove her and her siblings out of the house. So she has agreed to go back to the village, to meet up with Tim, and to enter into this house and confront whatever is in there. And in order to get access, they have gotten in contact with Lemuel, who is the caretaker. And he has been the caretaker of this property for decades. And he is the only one who still has a key to the house. And he goes there from time to time and, does a bit of gardening and airs out the rooms in the house. And he's only there in daytime, never more than a few hours, never after nightfall. But it means that he knows the house, and he knows its quirks, he knows its little passages, and it seems that the house has somehow come to develop perhaps some kind of affinity with him. It accepts him. He remember going there in the beginning and being like doors shutting behind him, strong gusts of wind almost pushing him back off the property, branches falling from on high, like a sudden feeling that he's drawn toward the windows and the edges of the building, like this sudden urge to throw yourself over a ledge and just stumble to your death into the garden. But these things have worn off over the years, and now it's almost as if he sees himself like the house is like this giant, dangerous pit. It's like having a tiger as a pet, and he will go in there and he'll just, sort of gently just stroke its furs and comfort it and clean out its corners a little bit, but, not too much, leave it alone, never overstep its boundaries. And that's kind of his relationship. It's a big, sleeping monster on the hill, and he goes up to pet it a little bit and clean it between its teeth, and then he backs off. So Holt and Kate have hooked up with Lemuel and have decided to come and visit the house. And what you cannot see here on the map is because actually my video, my webcam here is obscuring it. But if I move it out a little bit, you'll see here, I'm taking these colored diamonds to help you see a little clearer what's going on. The yellow diamond up here is Kate. I'm pretty sure you cannot read it says Kate there. But if you can, you got good strong eyes, so good for you. But Kate is going to be represented by this yellow diamond, and Holt, the photojournalist, by the green diamond, and Lemuel, the caretaker, by the blue diamond. And right down here, where they were before, is the veranda where you enter the house. So soon they'll be in the house and you'll be able to follow along. Now, what you may be wondering is, what's on with this thing on the right side of the board? Now, this is where things get super interesting and where this game just takes off. Because what you see on the right side is the astral plane, which means that This map over here has like numerous rooms that are connected with each other in various occult ways, like through doors and stairs, of course, but there are also secret passageways, and there are also spirit passageways between different rooms. Now, on the astral plane, all these little joints, they are power centers in this grid. At the center of the grid is the entity that controls the house. Around it are the 12 axes of evil, which are like spokes in a wheel. And this is where the power of the house emanates from. And each of these spokes, they have 3 different minor spokes below them, or minor focal points below them. And each focal point maps to one of the rooms in the house. So for example, this focal point here is the kitchen. So this point here maps to the kitchen, which is down here. That's a bad example because that's just off map. This is a huge map. Now let's take the attic instead. Down here, this one, it maps to the attic, which is up here. So basically, if you're in the attic and you enter into the astral plane, you will be here on the astral plane, and then you'll be able to travel with your astral body to the dining room, which is, let's see, where is the dining room? It's down here. Can you see that? I think you can see the top of it. It's this one here, right down here at the bottom of the screen is the dining room. So on the astral plane, the dining room is directly linked to the attic, whereas if you have to walk through the house, it's kind of a long walk. So the game alternates play between the physical world and the spirit world, where the players travel around like astral bodies, trying to exorcise these different rooms, or more effectively trying to exorcise entire axes of evils. And every time they manage to exorcise one of these axes, the power of the entity at the core weakens. And if the power of the entity weakens sufficiently, it will be possible to take it on and purge the house of all evil. I don't know how realistic that is in terms of gameplay, that will happen, and I'm sure we're not gonna get there in this playthrough because it's probably gonna take like I don't know how many hours. But anyway, that's the aim of the game, is really to move around on the physical map, enter into the astral map, and exercise the focal points to cleanse the rooms in the physical house. Now, if it was just that, it would be kind of a one-way thing. So to sort of up the ante a little bit, the spirit plane is also sending in spirit characters into the physical plane. So the physical characters will be haunted by spirits in the physical plane, and they can then move into the astral plane to try to exorcise the rooms there. So there's going to be a lot of going back and forth, and there's going to be drama on both sides of the board. And it's just a fantastic idea, I think, to make a house which has this standard interlinking between rooms and squares, and then have a astral map, which, as you can see, is completely randomly set up. So every time you play the game, the astral connections in the house will be different. And it's, of course, mind-boggling because there are 36 focal points and 12 axes. So, you know, the numbers here are through the roof. And that's one of the things that makes this game insurmountably complicated. And, I mean, I guess if you'd made it with far fewer rooms and far fewer points, you would have something that's much more playable. But again, that is for designers in our day to come back and take this game and kind of squeeze sort of the best juice out of it and make something that is also playable. Because this game is it's a procedural mess, to be honest. Like, you go through all these steps in a turn, so you're basically just going through procedures, and they are just written in blocks of text, which is very, very unhelpful. So if you see here, like, these are the rules, right? These are just endless blocks of, oh my goodness, I just messed up. I just messed up the psychic energy in the house. I'll have to restore that. Wow. I see spirits already being at work here. So like so much text, and it's full of exceptions. There are no bullet points. There are no reference sheet. There is nothing. So in order to actually at all play the game, I've had to go ahead and take a chart that was on Board Game Geek that someone made, and then just continued working on it and make my own thing. So what you're seeing here is basically just 4 full pages of procedural steps that you have to go through every turn to play the game. So I don't know how it's possible to internalize this game at all. I don't think it is. So you'll just have to take it step by step and see how the game works and get a feeling for the game and what it can do. So with all that out of the way, we're about as ready to go as we can get. I see Laura Ray 22 says, an astral wheel, amazing. Yes, I agree. It is absolutely amazing to have this astral wheel. I mean, this is such a cool idea. This is such a cool idea. I really, really love it. It's such a great to have this overlay with completely different connections than the physical map. It's brilliant. So, I've been talking for more than an hour now, so I think I'm just gonna take a 5-minute break, and then I'm gonna be back, and we will play the first turn of Nightmarehouse from 1983, one of the earliest horror games to take itself seriously. All right, guys, we are back in the Nightmarehouse, and we are ready to take the first turn of the game. So for anyone who just joined, it is Kate, the last surviving member of the Darkholm family, who is returning to her childhood home, the Darkholm Mansion, where her mother drowned herself and she was forcibly removed from it by the social authorities. And she's coming back with Holt, a photojournalist from the New York Times, who's out to make his big story and hopefully photograph a few ghosts along the way as well. And to lead them into this home of darkness is Lemuel, the caretaker. And he's the one who got the keys, and he's the one who knows the house like the back of his hand. But I also have a feeling that he may know the house a little bit too well. And that, whose side is this guy really on? Let's find out. So I've started out by, just to let you in a little bit on how this game works, by taking what is called power tokens. Is these kind of little tokens that you see here, and they have a number at the back, and that is a 4. So that basically represents spiritual energy. So at the beginning of each turn, the house gets a lot of spiritual energy, and each character gets spiritual energy corresponding to the psychic abilities. And really, this game is actually meant not to be a solo game. I'm just hacking it here. It's really a competitive game where one player is in the role of the house, and the other players, they each control one of the characters in the game, and they have to try to work together to defeat the house. But there are also some very, very vague solo rules, but since I'm doing this more like a storytelling game, it doesn't really matter. I'm just gonna follow my own solo rules here. So anyway, I powered up the characters, I powered up the house, and we are ready to go. So it is right now 6 o'clock. You cannot see the clock. The clock is down here in the bottom right corner. You can just see the top of the clock. And I'm following it around. It's now 6 o'clock. And if we have until 5 o'clock to rid the house of this entity. And if we haven't rid the house of this entity by 5 o'clock, the house is going to win, so to speak. Probably just going to drive us all insane. Or I guess we could also just abandon ship if we want at some point. But right now it's 6 o'clock. We enter the house, and Lemuel has made sure that all the lights are on in the house. So that's not a problem. The lights are on. And that may become a problem later, but right now it's not. So we can actually just go in through the front door, and I have made sort of an order where we have Kate is first, Kate Darkholm, the medium, and then Tim Holt, the photojournalist, and then Lemuel, the caretaker. So Lemuel, he opens the door, and we start entering into the house. So Kate, she has a movement of 5 while it's light. So she enters into the main hall. I guess you can see her here. And you can also see this light bulb, which shows that the light is on the first floor. There's also a light bulb on the second floor, and there's a light bulb on the third floor, so you can see where the light is on. And then there's some spaces that are always dark. And those spaces include these places here, where you can see some evil eyes looking at you. I need to move this up a little bit, I think. This down here is the cellar. Over here we have the crypt, we have the graveyard, and we have the attic. So these are nexuses of evil power. There are something that's tied to those places. So we can go there, but it may be dangerous, but it's also a way to get close to the entity. And Swordfinder says, so we have 11 hours to solve it. That's true. And given the complexity of the game, I would say that it almost plays in real time. Like 1 hour for a turn, at least when I was preparing for the stream and running a few turns just to see how it flew, I must say that they took at least an hour to play a turn. I think I'm a bit faster now, but yeah. So I hope you have 11 hours to spare. I don't know what time you're meeting in at the office on Monday morning, but you may have to call in sick for the first couple of hours until we finish this game. So there are those, and then you also see, hopefully, these red crystals here. These red crystals here, they correspond to the red crystals over here. So those are focal points. So this means that there is now a focal point of energy over here on the astral map, the place which maps to the nursery. And the nursery is up here. So there is a special focal energy point in the nursery, which means that is where various energies can manifest themselves. And there is another focus of energy in the library down here. And then you can also see all these purple markers on the board. I think perhaps you can see them. Those are discovery markers. So those are places where we can go and then we can discover something. And then we have to look in the rules and see what we discover. I have no idea really what you can discover in this game. I've just seen a few of them. So let's try it out. So Kate, I think what Kate wants to do, she steps into the main hall. She's back in her childhood home for the first time in decades. And she's standing there at the bottom of the steps and she's looking up, and she has this feeling that you often have when you return to something from your childhood. How tiny it is. I mean, this is a massive mansion, but she remembers this house being as big as the universe. There was a whole world in there. The house was a village unto itself, with all its rooms and corridors and servants and cousins and uncles and aunts and people who were just always around. And also these sort of strange looking fellows in dark robes that her father was hanging out with in the house and that she was not allowed to really interact with. So she stands there a little bit awed, and she is trying to find, I guess, a place where she really can connect to the house. And I think for her, it is probably to get up to the nursery, which is exactly where she spent so many hours, like lying in that bed with her nanny sitting next to her, comforting her, telling her, don't worry too much about the strange sounds that the house is making, the creaking, the noises, the faint screaming, which is really just the wind howling and those sudden footsteps upstairs, but it's just, branches falling on the roof, all these kind of things. And she remembers there lying in her bed, just imagining, her imagination running wild from all these impressions that the house were giving onto her, and her mate was the only arbiter who was really sort of between her and the house. So she wants to get back up to the nursery. And I'm happy to see that Swordfinder says that 11 hours is no problem. I'm great to hear that you don't have to get up early tomorrow. Like hopefully not anyone who's watching this stream. Or if you have to get up early tomorrow, this is your chance to forget about it. This is actually what I'm trying to sell you here. Just forget about it. Just immerse yourself in the horror, stare it in its face, and that will make the reality around you just fade into complete insignificance. So yes, let's fade together. So Katie, she walks up the steps and she opens the door to the nursery and she steps inside. And she immediately feel that something is in there, that it's so powerful. She lies down on her bed, which her feet are now dangling over the edge of the bed because she has grown way too big for it. And she lies there and just stares up into the ceiling, and she just feels her body. It's almost as if being dragged down into the mattress. She's lying there and she's looking really at her wrist to see, did someone just like put leather straps on my wrist and my ankles, or what is this force that is just pulling me down into the mattress? So she lies there and the energy surges through her, but she knows the energy in a different way than she did when she was a child, because now she's an adult, she's a medium, and she has ventured far, far into the realms of the spirit. And she knows this power, and she can sense how strong it is and how tiny she is. Compared to the entity, she is really still a child as she lies down there on that bed. Now, Holt, the photojournalist, he is, of course, looking for, some good photos to take, something nice, something creepy. So he's heard that there is they have a private graveyard out back, like where all the members of the family are buried. That is just almost too good. But before he goes into the graveyard, he just wants to stop by the chapel. The chapel is up here, and he kind of want to take some photos of the old tombs, the old inscriptions. So he goes up here he goes down here. This is the portrait gallery. So as he's walking down this big corridor, he sees the portraits of all these ancestors of the Darkholm family. What is fascinating about these portraits is really that they go beyond Josiah's portrait, the guy who built the house. He has added all these other portraits of his own ancestors. And some of those ancestors, they look not very much like Josiah at all. Like, they have different features. They have completely different complexities, different complexions. So it is as if, as you move beyond Josiah in the line of family portraits, it's almost as if you're moving into a completely different sort of animal, a different something that is only part flesh, but whose flesh is informed by something else. There are energies searching through these portraits, and you can see this connection, this forcible connection between Josiah and some kind of entity that is driving up through, and you just wonder what it was that he stumbled upon out there east that connected him to this and put him in touch with these ancestors, which perhaps we're not talking blood lineage anymore. Perhaps we're talking spiritual ancestors. Perhaps we're talking some kind of essence that has been wandering from these people from one to the other and into Josiah. And Holt, he takes photos and he's already marking it down like, this is going to be a fantastic portrait. Just the portraits are fantastic. They show an evolution that seems completely contradictory to what any kind of person, any kind of knowledge that we have of how genetic traits are transferred from generation to generation. He walks down the corridor and he opens the door and he steps into this sort of cold and dark and dank chapel, and he whips out his camera and he starts taking photos. Karmic ancestors, Laura Ray 22 says. Yes, exactly. Karmic ancestors. I think that's what we're looking at. I mean, I don't want to overinterpret the game at this point, but I think that's what he's looking at. Some kind of karmic ancestors. I think you're absolutely right. And then Lemuel. Well, Lemuel, he knows his house, and he also knows that, having Kate come visit from so far away, and now she's grown big, and she's a real adult now, and she has a successful career as a medium. So he kind of want to help out. He is happy, and he hopes that the house will also be happy to have one of its children back in the house. and he wants to do what he can to help out. So he is gonna go around and I think search out for something that might help them in their endeavors. And let's see, where does he want to go? The music room, the game room. Any ideas of any suggestions as to where Lemuel go? Is he just gonna perhaps go into the kitchen and get a bottle of scotch and some glasses and pour drinks for everybody? Play the waiter for a little bit? I mean, while they're exploring the house? Yeah, I think that's it. But please do let me know if you have any suggestions or any feelings of where you want the story to go, and I'll try to accommodate all of your suggestions. So Lemuel, he walks down here and he goes through the service hall. It's just like this tiny hall that two people can just barely pass each other. And you just wonder, walking down through it, how the servants in the past, walking down there with silver trays and how they managed to get by each other. But they must have had like certain acrobatic techniques to do that. So he goes into the kitchen, which is just off screen, but I think I'll leave him on top here. And that's really the only room that you cannot see off screen. So he goes into the kitchen to prepare drinks. So we have done all that, and now we have the possibility of do a warding. And Kate, she senses that there is a certain power in this house up here, and she feels that she wants to try to cleanse this room. Because if she's going to operate from the nursery, she cannot operate. It's just crushing her capabilities to connect to the other world. It's too forceful. She cannot control the energy in here. So she tries to do a warding. It is super difficult because the entity is so powerful. It has 12 spokes, which means that it has a strength of 12 right now. And the focus circle is in, these are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this one is on 3, which basically means that Kate needs to roll 15 with 2 dice. And she has a +2 because she's Kate, and she has the special spiritual power, but it actually means that she will not be able to ward off. And see, already there, I may have set myself up for disaster, because I had actually thought that Kate might be able to move this focal point, somehow expel it out of this room and into another room. But apparently I was wrong. So Kate lies on the bed and she tries with all her mental strength and all her spiritual power to remove this heavy energy that she feels pressing on her chest, but she just cannot do it. She is just completely pressed down onto that bed. Now, what we have here is that now the spiritual world, it starts manifesting itself. The house has noticed that strangers are in the house. Lemuel, the house knows. Kate, the house knows Kate. The house has a long memory, and it knows Kate's and remembers her as a child, and also remember that it had a special bond with her. She was the one that the house wanted to pass its energy on to. She wanted her to inherit the energy that her mother had possessed and that had driven her mother to suicide in the lake. But Kate was removed from the house by the authorities, and so Kate was only partly developed spiritually. So the house now sees this as an opportunity to completely overtake Kate and get her back in the fold. It wants to keep her in the house and to come to their aid. And now, what you also cannot see here at the bottom of the board is that we have a soul track, which shows how strong or fragile the souls of the people in the house are. And when the soul track comes down to 0, it means that they're risking being permanently possessed by the house. But right now, Kate, she is down to 6. So, and the maximum is 12. So she's always has a fragile soul because she has this opening to the spiritual world. Holt, the photojournalist, he's at 8. He's got a bit further to go before his soul completely cracks. But still he has an attention to this world because he's photographing these spirits. So he also knows what's going on. Lemuel, on the other hand, the caretaker, he is up at 12. So he's got like a long way to go down to 0. And that is, of course, because he is comfortable with the house in a way that the others are not. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw some spiritual entities, some haunts, as they're called. And I'm going to draw 3 of them. And we're going to see what they are. And then, let's see here. There's not too much to learn from looking at these, but I'm just going to show them to you once. Let's see, what does it say? It's really difficult to read. It says blood on one of them, and it says floating weapons on another one, and then it says what? Familiar on the last one of them. And as you can see, 2 of them are triangles, and one of them is square. The square, that is the blood, is a psychic entity, whereas the floating weapons and the familiar are physical manifestations. And the physical manifestations, they start a little further away. So they start at 8 o'clock, meaning that they will enter the game in 2 hours, whereas the psychic entities, they only start 1 hour ahead. So I'm just going to see how many of these I want to keep. Let's just try to... I'll take the familiar. I'll throw out the floating weapons. I think that's kind of not cool. So I'll throw them out for now. And then the house is going to energize these different haunts. They add some energy to it. I don't know what energy they're adding to them, but some energy level is added to them, showing how dangerous they might be. And now there's also the possibility of energizing them to the point that they manifest now. And I think that's exactly what the house is going to do. It's going to manifest its psychic blood haunt at this point, and it's also going to manifest its familiar... it's not going to manifest the familiar now, but it's going to move it one closer. So even though it's a physical haunt, it'll come out already next turn, and it's going to be super powerful when it comes out, I think. So we will now take this psychic blood energy, and it can manifest anywhere where there is a focal point in the house or in one of these special places, haunted places like the attic, the graveyard, the crypt, and the cellar. But of course, what happens is that the blood manifests in the nursery where Kate is together with this focal point. So now another cool thing, we take the Ares magazine and we actually look up blood, and we'll get some kind of description of what is actually going on here, which I find to be pretty awesome. So let's see what is actually happening up in the nursery. Gouts of bright red blood well up at your feet, filling the air with an awful coppery scent. So as Kate is lying on the bed, she sees blood rising from the floor, as if she's in a bathtub with water rising, except it's blood. And it comes up to the edge of the bed and it starts spilling into the covers, and she can feel the blood lapping like gentle waves against her arms and her legs, and it's covering her hands, and she's trying to lift her hand and she can't, and it's coming up her chest and at her neck, and it's coming, and it starts spilling into her mouth, and she's trying to spit out the blood, but it keeps rising above her, and she has to mentally battle this manifestation. So, how do we do that? The house will now reveal the power of this psychic blood manifestation. It has a power of 3 in itself, and then it has 2 additional. It's a 1 and a 3, so it has a total of 7. Bloodbath, said Swordmender. You're absolutely right. She is in a bloodbath situation, and she is not floating, so she better get out of this. So it has a strength of 7, and then we have Kate, and she has a very strong psychic energy, so she has a strength of 6, and she's also wearing a talisman. And this talisman is the one thing that remains from her time in the house. It was given to her by her mother. And her mother always said to always wear it, to always keep it, and that it would keep her safe, because she was the apple of her mother's eye. And she was always thought of as special. And perhaps she sometimes thinks she feels guilty about being given this, because her siblings were not being given these kind of artifacts. And they all died within a year of being removed from the house. So there is energy stored in this talisman. And as she lies there, she just hears like a faint whispering sound in her ear. Just her mother whispering, calming, comforting words into her ear as the blood rises up to the level of her mouth and starts spilling in. So it's a complete, it's a dead match with, they each have +6, so we're just gonna roll and see what happens. Let's roll for the blood first. The blood gets a 4, so it's at 10. It's at 11. It's +7. And Kate gets a 3, so Kate's in. So blood spills into Kate's mouth. It comes into her, and she gargles, and she cannot breathe, and she just sits up in bed, and she screams, and there's just a flood of blood that spews out of her mouth, and she looks all around her, and the walls are just covered with blood, and she's got blood just dripping down her dress. So this means that the house basically steals some of Kate's energy. And she has an energy 4. Energy levels are between 1 and 4. And she has an energy level 4. So the house is going to steal that power from her. And she's just left there, sitting there. So even though the blood did not rise to suffocate her, there is still blood everywhere. So there is kind of a very porous barrier between visions and reality. And she also loses a part of her soul. So she moves from 6 down to 5, which means that the house is drawing her in. And as I said before, the goal of the house is to get her down to 0, possess her, and make her the new master or mistress of the house. Does anything else happen that is horrible? Of course, she has to make a panic check. So let's see if she panics. She panics if she rolls equal to or higher than her psychic strength. And her psychic strength is 6, so she only panics on a 6. So she's really difficult to scare, this girl, even though she almost just suffocated in spiritual blood. She is totally not. She almost panicked. That was a 5, but on a 6 she would have panicked. So she gets up from bed, and she survived that haunt. And the blood haunt disappears. We throw it back into the mix, and the power go out as well. The power markers go out as well. So that was the haunts. So I think no one has heard anything from upstairs. The nursery has been completely soundproofed. And Holt and Lemuel, they're just walking around downstairs as if nothing happened. Lemuel probably has an idea. He's probably, he just heard that scream through the wall somehow. But he knows not to interfere with the house. So what can you do? So Lemuel and Holt, they're going to search where they are and see if they can find anything of interest. So let's start up with Holt. He's in the chapel. He is taking photos of all the inscriptions, and he's like trying to see if he can lift off some of the lids from like an old coffin that is stuck in one of the hollows, or he has a flashlight and he's looking into the corners of where the coffins were slid in to see if anything is left in there. And in order to succeed here, he needs to roll less than his highest strength. He needs to just roll anything but a 6. And he rolls a 6. So already now we're kind of establishing Holt as a bit of a happy-go-lucky, perhaps not super attentive guy. Perhaps he is just so obsessed about getting that front page story for the New York Times that he's overlooking stuff. I mean, I cannot believe that there was not something to be discovered in the chapel. I mean, but Holt, he moves his flashlight around, he kicks in the corner, and there's a bit of a cobweb, and he photographs an inscription, and he doesn't really, notice the dark shadow that moves on the wall behind him. He's that character. So, in a way, he is, you can say, he is shielded off from some of the horror by not being attentive to it, but usually this also means that it's not going to end pretty for Holt, I think. Lemuel, he's in the kitchen, and he's looking around. He's making drinks, and he's just looking around to see, is there actually anything from Kate's childhood or anything else to interact with? Laura Ray says he's not ready to see the horror. Yeah, that's right. He wants to see the horror, but he's not really ready. He just doesn't understand. He thinks he can just go with his camera, take a photo, come on the front page of the New York Times, but the house doesn't play like that. It doesn't play like that at all. Lemuel searches the kitchen. On a 1 to 4, he'll find something. 2, he finds something. Let's see what he finds. Oh my goodness. Let's see this, guys. See it? A skull. So Lemuel finds a skull in the kitchen. My goodness. Is this like an animal skull, or is this something else? Is this something that someone once cooked? Let's have a look. You find a human skull weighted for use as a paperweight. It is the preserved skull of one of Lilith's deceased husbands. And at this point, I should mention that Lilith is the mother of Kate, and she had several husbands. And I mean, she managed to have 7 children, and not with 7 different husbands, but almost. She went through 4 husbands, and they all came to horrible ends. And in the end, when she was finally widowed for the 4th time, she took her own life, drowned herself in the lake. So, and this, Swordman asks, who keeps a human skull in the kitchen? What is for dinner, I wonder? Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know how this, it says it's a paperweight, so I guess it's used to press down all the receipts from the grocery shopping. And the skull that is pressing down those receipts is the skull of one of Lilith's late husbands. So this can pretty much only be Lilith who used one of her husband's skull as a paperweight. That's pretty dark. And as Lemuel stands there and looks at it, the skull, some sounds starts coming from the skull, and it looks almost, at least he thinks he sees it, moves its mouth, and he hears these deep, growling words coming from deep inside it. It's saying horrible things about Lilith. It's denouncing her. It's swearing. It's gargling. And he can make out a word every here and there between these sort of dark, beastly growls. And the words are all about Lilith and what a bitch she was to him and what she deserves and what should be done to her. So it is revealing, oh my goodness. The skull is basically revealing all the different discovery markers on one of the floors of the house. So it's telling about the house secrets. So let's see what we have to do here. Okay. Okay, wow. So this skull in the kitchen is a kind of oracle, and it starts talking about the house, and it's revealing all these things that are going on. So it says, we still need to go to these places in order to investigate what it actually means. But right now, what we're told, and we're going to take the third floor. So up there in the suite parlor, there is an exorcism +1, which means that it reveals that there is something up there in the parlor that can be used effectively to exorcise some of the evil in the house. It also says that in the master bedroom, there are ropes. And by that I mean the nightgown, the master's nightgown. We don't know why it mentions the nightgown, but apparently the nightgown must have some kind of effect. Whether it's positive or negative, I have no idea. And the skull again communicates in the storeroom. There is another thing that can be used to dispel the house and just like or dispel some of the evil in the house. So it's talking about all these artifacts. There's an artifact in the exorcism. This is an old, weird yantric design from the east that's carved into a copper plate, and it can be used to dispel the evil. And it tells Lemuel about that. And up in the guest room, there is another thing. So basically, on the third floor are stored all these objects that, if used properly, they can actually strengthen the attempt to exorcise the evil powers in the house. So this is really powerful information. And the skull is just sitting there, emanating this in a weird combination of sounds and flashes of imagery. So that is what Lemuel finds. Now, what happens is that the connection between the physical plane and the astral plane now opens up. So what we're going to do is that we're going to move the psyches of the physical characters onto the astral plane. So for example, Lemuel, he's in the kitchen. So I'm going to move his psyche and I'm going to put it into the kitchen. And the kitchen is up here. So now Lemuel's psyche is up there. Oh, I'm forgetting to use these, move these counters with them. So Lemuel's psyche is up there, and Tim's psyche is in the chapel. The chapel is down here. And Kate's psyche is, of course, in the nursery, which is this one, right at the focal point. I don't know what that's gonna... Yeah, I actually don't know how that works, but that's fine. So now all the psyches are on the astral plane, and now they have a chance to basically astral project onto the psychic plane to battling with the house on the metaphysical plane. Now, I'm pretty sure that Tim has no idea what's going on. So he just feels there's this weird shimmer. It's like everything becomes blurred and then it comes back again. And he's still in chapel, but he's also seeing things that are not really there. And it's as if he can, when he puts out his hand, it kind of goes through the wall. And as he looks at the wall of the chapel, he's looking straight into, let's see what's upstairs. The attic is right here. So suddenly he just looks up, and it's as if he looks through all the floors of the house straight up into the attic, where he sees some weird entity up there. And let's see what entity he's seeing. He is seeing a secret fears. So he looks up and he just sees his worst nightmare up there. And that nightmare, I wonder what that is. I mean, he grew up around this house, and I think at this point in time, his biggest nightmare is probably, not to succeed, not to make it, but there is something that's been with him from his childhood. something that's always been sitting on his shoulder, gnawing at his throat, with its fangs deep embedded in his flesh. And that one thing is what he sees up there. It's that fear of not being. It's a fear. What is it a fear of? It is a fear, I think it's a fear of him not being accepted in the world. I mean, that is why he's turned into a photojournalist, that he's doing everything is external to him. He's taking photos, he's putting them up. He wants to be seen. He wants other people to see his work. So it's that recognition, and it grows from something inside of him, that he was an abandoned child, a child that wasn't seen. And he's just looking up at that, and that not being seen had a physical face. It was this being that he imagined that was always judging him, this second voice that he was carrying around that was always telling him that he wasn't good enough. And it had kind of a face, and it was one of those faces, that come alive when you look at strangely randomly aligned textures, and you see suddenly a face in the wallpaper, or a face in a bush, or a face in a cloud. It was this face that could congeal and manifest itself everywhere, and it was always judging him. And right up there in the attic, he knows now it's there, and it's looking down upon him. And he knows in his heart of hearts that that is where the photo is. If he can go up there and he can capture his innermost fear, the face that has materialized in every texture he has ever looked at since he was a child, that has driven him mad with fear so many times, that have kept him awake through so many sleepless nights. If he can catch that on his camera, then he will transcend it, and he will get his big story. So I think now we already have a really strong motivation for Tim here. He's seen something. He really has. But he doesn't know about astral projection yet. He's going to find out, I promise you. But he's not going to astral project up there because he does not know how. But now he kind of knows that there is a possibility. Laura Ray 22 says, that's deep. Yeah, we're getting deep here. And again, as always, please chime in and add whatever you feel needs adding. I'm kind of trying to make these tiny bits and pieces of cardboard come alive a little bit. Try to flesh out some characters. Try to find some objectives, and just be guided by randomness. Swordvander says he just needs to survive so he can develop the film. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, let's see how that goes. I don't know if how strong the house's grip is on these people. I guess if they achieve an objective, they may just try to flee the house. But yeah, let's see if he gets that far. So that was Holt, and then we have Lemuel, who is in the kitchen, and he is up there. And he's used to that. He's used to going in and out of this spiritual plane, physical plane. He doesn't really matter. He knows there are other shapes there moving about like shadows, and he knows not to make eye contact, not that they all have eyes, but not to stare directly at the phenomena that are manifesting, but just accept them as something out of the corner of your eye. Go around your business, keep your head down a little. It's just the house manifesting itself. It's okay. Just be cool. And he's certainly not interested at all in trying to astral project, at least not at this point. Maybe he'll become so later. And then, of course, we have Kate. And as you can see, Kate is really close to the inner axis. So what I think that she's going to do, also because she's a master of astral projection, which means that she can astral project without risking getting lost. Guys like Holt and Lemuel, they can actually get lost when they astral project, but not Kate. So what we're going to do is we're going to take Kate's astral projection marker, because of course there's an astral projection marker in a game like Nightmarehouse.
You can do this better. There you go. This is the astral projection marker. So she astral projects into this space. And normally you would have to make a die roll to see if you get lost on the astral plane. But as I said, like, she doesn't, because she's really good at this. And if she had astral projected further, she could build a lifeline with her power markers. And we just saw previously that she had one of her power markers stolen from her, which is not a good thing when you're trying to exercise. But hey, she's Kate, and she wants to get on with this. And she wants to basically try to cleanse this entire axis of evil, which would cleanse this entire spoke of the wheel and would kind of push the focus marker out of the nursery. So since she didn't manage to ward it off in the beginning, she now has this plan B, which is just cleanse the entire spoke. It's gonna be difficult, but I think maybe Kate can do it because she's a very strong astral projector. So let's see how she does. So the house is here on 1, 2, 3, 4. It's on circle 4, which means that it can commit up to 4 of its power markers. It's certainly going to commit the 4 that it stole from Kate, because that is the highest number that you can have. And then it's blindly going to commit 3 more, because I'm playing solo. If I was not playing solo, then the house, of course, would choose which counters to commit. But here we just do it randomly. So that probably gives like an edge to the characters, but what the hey. And how much is Kate gonna commit? Because she can of course commit everything, but the house will also attack her back at some point after the exorcism and will try to possess her or drain her soul. So she might also want something to defend against that. So let's just say she has a 2, 2 3s, and a 4. So she's gonna commit 2 3s and a 4. So she's basically committing 10, and then she's keeping a 2 for later. And all these numbers just refer to spiritual energy. I'm not gonna keep on saying all these numbers, but I'm just gonna say that she commits a lot to try to exercise the axis, and the house is also committing its maximum of what it can commit back the other way. So this is going to be like a real serious psychic battle. And first the house will roll a die, and it will add, ooh, it's strong. The house has 13 plus 4, because it's in circle 4, so it has 17. So the house roll a die plus 17, so it gets 21. This is massive, Kate. I hope you're ready for this. And Kate has 10. And does she have anything more? Oh, I have completely underestimated the power of this. Oh my goodness. Does she have any exercising tools? She doesn't even have any exercising tools. Okay, now this is gonna go wrong. So the house was at 21, and Kate is at 14. So she's trying. I mean, I think it's too much, right? But she's trying to push back against this force in the nursery, and for the first time, she's reaching out with her psychic energy, just like confronting the house head on in one of its focal points. And only now she realizes the house is that strong. And as Swordman rightly says, the house always wins. So that was not very good. That was a problem here. So what happens now is that Kate's psyche becomes vulnerable. So her psyche becomes vulnerable. So I'm gonna flip that around, and then her soul is dragged closer. It started at 6. It's already at 4, and we're not even through turn 1. This is kind of tough. And she is also astral projecting. Okay, this is a nightmare, guys. What happens here is just a complete nightmare, because what just happened now is that Kate has become lost on the astral plane, which means that we have to flip her astral projected self onto this side where you can kind of see her being lost. And so she's now here. She's wandering the astral plane, and she cannot go back to her body. So what we do is that we take... there's so many markers in this game, which is something that's actually quite wonderful. Because what you're going to see now is this marker, which is the unconscious marker. So this is how she's going to lie, spread-eagled on the nursery bed, while her astral self is removed. Her astral self is here, right? And her psyche is here. So it's been projected here. And we're already getting a sense of what this game is trying to simulate here. I mean, this is so cool. She's in the nursery. She's sending herself into the spirit world. She's traveling to try to exorcise the house. She's lost on the plane. We now have an unconscious character lying in the bedroom. We have a psyche that is connected to this room, and we just have this soul that is just drifting in space, in astral space. And the only way to get that soul, to save that soul, is now for someone else to enter the astral plane and retrieve the soul back into its body. So whatever plans we had before about battling this house is now completely turned, because now Lemuel is aware, and he's probably also going to make Holt aware, that Kate has been drawn into the house. Her body is in the house, but her astral self is traveling around, the spiritual energy, and it's so close to the center. This is gonna get dark. Let's see. Is there anything more? I mean, I guess this was absolutely enough. But yeah, she is lost. Oh my goodness. Let's see. So now we have to make a lost check. So I have to roll some dice. She did not have a lifeline. And I need to roll equal to or less than the number of the astral body. So I'm sorry, there's a bit of rules things here that I just need to figure out. 4, 1, 5. Wait a sec. I mean, she's already lost. Okay. This is a check that you do. You always check to see if you're lost when you're traveling in the astral space. But what actually happened here was that she just got immediately lost because she failed this contest against an entire axis. So this was foolhardy of her, but none of the other has astral projected, so they cannot become lost. So thank God that we didn't astral project with the others, because then this game would be basically over. So now the house strikes back. It has drawn these psyches into the spirit world, and now it's going to try to consume them. So it's going to attack everybody in the spirit world. So let's see. First, it can move its focus points, but I think it's really happy still having its focus point with Kate. Maybe the library focus point can be moved into the chapel. Where is the chapel? It's down here. Yeah, it's going to do that. It can move 3 spaces. So it simply moves the focus into the chapel. So as you see, it's 2 spaces here on the spirit map, and it's more spaces on this map, but because they interlink, as I explained before, the one of the focal points is now right where Holt is. So both Holt and Kate are now in a spiritual focal point. This is a very, very dangerous scenario, and we're still within the first hour of the game. And I believe this turn has already almost taken an hour. So as I said, if we're going to play through the whole thing, it's going to be 11 hours, but I do sense that it may not be 11 hours with this horrible start that we have come off to. So let's do some possession attacks. And the house can basically attack with as much energy as it wants. And it attacks psyches on the astral map. So it can even attack Kate's psyche, even though she is separated from her body. So it's going to go max power on Kate's psyche with 3 power markers. And it's also going to be max up. Oh, it can attack with 3 also on hold. So it's going to attack with 3. And then it only has 2 left. And it's going to use them to attack Lemuel. Because the house now feels that Lemuel has brought these people into the house, and the house now knows that Holt is only there to basically get his front page, and Kate is actually there to try to confront the house. And the house doesn't want Lemuel to switch side and start helping her out, so it's also going to try to claim his soul. So let's see what happens. The hunters can also throw in their energy, so Kate, she left a little bit of power to resist this attack, but it's not going to be enough, I think. Then we have Lemuel has a lot of power, and Hold also has a lot of power, so they may be able to resist the attacks. So the house may not be strong enough to actually attack them, but let's see what happens. Yeah, this is where things are a little bit technical with counting up stuff and rules and things. So I'm gonna go through it, but I'm not gonna get too stuck up on all the details here, because this game is not very intuitive like that. You just follow steps, but the steps never stick because there's no sort of real logic to them. Each step just has its own rules. So it's like learning a new set of rules for each step. It's not very helpful. But let's see. So the house, let's start with Kate. The house attacks Kate, and Kate was a little bit lucky there because the house only has 5 in its but it also adds the circle that she's on, so it's at 3, so it's at 8, and she only has 2, and they each throw a die, right? So the house gets to 9 and Kate's get to 7. So there is no luck, and the house wins. So again, the house now has different opportunities. It can drain more of Kate's soul, or it can possess her and use her to attack the other players in the house. Another really cool mechanic in this game, I mean, not that it's so original that a character can become possessed and then work against the other characters, but it's so nicely integrated that if you risk too much in the spirit world and you detach too much from your physical body, you can become possessed, and for a while, the house will then control your character in the game until it snaps back. It's a really cool mechanic. It's very well integrated into the game. But I think seeing that Kate is really always being drawn so close to... Swordman says possession is the obvious choice. See, this is interesting because... oh my goodness. Okay, I'm of course going to take Swordman's advice. What I was trying to argue was that the house would probably rather try to drain her soul power, because it has already drained her 2 points, and now it has a chance to drain her yet another point. But if it possesses her, then she's going to walk around in her unconscious body, trying to basically confront the other characters who are try to reach her on the astral plane to make her snap out of the possession. This is going to be great. Let's possess her. By all means. I'm going to flip her soul to its possessed side. These, by the way, are soul markers that I have on a soul track that you cannot see. And when I flip them around, the souls become possessed. And it's dark gray on black. It's really difficult. No, it's faint red tracing on black. I don't know if you can see the shape of a person there. I kind of can't, but maybe you can. Anyway, Kate has been possessed by the house. So suddenly she sits up in the bed like in The Exorcist, and her soul is completely elsewhere, and another soul has entered into her physical being. Fantastic. I love this. I mean, again, it's what I love about these old school simulation games. Yeah, they have way too many rules and they have way too many exceptions, and there's Chrome here and Chrome there. But what it does is that it really allows for this kind of emergent storytelling. I mean, what other game that you would play today would have all these things happening that have just happened in this first turn of the game? I mean, to allow for all this is just crazy. Like, she has been, Kate has been pressed down into a bed. She's almost been drowned in blood. She's traveled on the astral plane. She's become separated from a physical body, fallen unconscious. Now she's possessed, and now she's just sitting up in bed, almost like a living corpse. I mean, how absolutely awesome is this? Thank you, Nightmarehouse, for being such an impossible game that no one knows about. So, let's remove these power markers. And this is only the first possession, guys. This is not a fast game, I'm telling you. So just hang in there. I just gotta check if everything is good. She was possessed. And that means... Possessed. If soldier is 1, 2, flip 100 possession of psyche as soldier. Oh, so she drops. Oh, this is horrible, actually. So she sits up in bed, and what's happened is that she just tears her protective talisman off her neck and just throws it in the corner. So we're gonna take her talisman, which gave her that special protection, her childhood amulet, and she throws it out of the game into the corner of the room, never to be found again. It just quickly just is dragged into a tiny opening in the panels, just by the level of the floor. Just disappears in there to a tiny hole, never to be seen again. So now Kate is as vulnerable as she can be, and she's also lost. I don't even know that the game has rule for a situation where someone who is lost becomes possessed, but it's happening right now. Swordvender says, perhaps that is why the house wanted to possess her, to remove the talisman of astral projection. Yes, I think that's a good point, because it knew that that talisman was keeping the house from really getting to her, but now she is completely open to attack. So let's go to Holt, who is in the chapel. He's just been staring up into the ceiling, where he's basically seen this manifestation of his own childhood insecurities gnawing at him. And while it's staring down at him, he suffers a serious psychic attack. Let's see how strong that attack is, if he's got any way of going against it. I think he has. It attacks with 9 plus 2, 11, and he defends with 9. Okay, so it has 11 plus 4, so that's 15. He has 9 plus 3, that's 12, which means, again, Holt loses this battle. So he just looks up into this terrible face with its gnawing teeth and all the sort of tiny little people that are being stuck in his teeth while he's grinding his teeth in his mouth and looking down at him. And he sees this through the ages. He sees all the times throughout his life that he has seen this face. He now just sees it projected like one on top of the other, just like a series, just like a flood of images that comes into his brain and completely overwhelms him. So the house can possess him, or it can drain his soul. But perhaps the house now knows that if Holt is allowed to roam free, he can potentially basically help Kate, help find Kate's lost astral soul, or it can fight her. And the thing that I haven't told you about Holt is, of course, that he has a pistol. And I don't think the house wants Holt to shoot Kate, because the house wants to keep Kate. So I think, again, that it possesses Holt. So Holt's soul is now possessed, and his psyche becomes, again, vulnerable, and he falls unconscious as well in the chapel. I mean, I think this must be one of the worst playthroughs of Nightmarehouse. Very, very fittingly that you should all get to watch this. This is just like a massive house victory right here. But that's how we want it. So the house is basically keeping Lemuel from helping Kate. So now there's only, keeping Tim from helping Kate. Now it's also trying to attack Lemuel. This is serious business. This is serious business, because what the devil is it gonna do to Lemuel? Lemuel has a strength of 8 against the house strength of only 5. So the house has 5 plus 6, wow, that's 11. Lemuel has 8 plus 4, which is 12. So Lemuel just manages to repel the psychic attack of the house. And Laura Ray 22 says, beware with Lemuel. Yeah, because the house did lash out at him, but perhaps it was more like a warning. Because Lemuel just discovered the skull in the kitchen and learned about all these different amulets and occult weapons and artifacts that are hidden in the house that can actually help dispel the evil from the house. And it's kind of telling him, don't go down that road, Lemuel. This is where it leads. But I think Lemuel is also in a dilemma here. Because is this not the point where the caretaker, who's been taking care of this house for such a long time, who's been stroking the back of this, allegorical, monstrous pet that he has, that he must decide to help the daughter of the house, Kate, or let the house consume her. So he is really in a dilemma, because it's so dangerous for him to try to help Kate. But if he doesn't do it, then he will just let the house overtake her and leave it. And maybe that is his best option. But I do think this is where Lemuel's conscience has to come into play, and he has to try to rise up against this superior power. Whether it's going to succeed is probably very unlikely, but I do think that he has to try. Laura Ray asked, how can he use the third floor stuff? Well, to use it, he has to get up to the third floor and he has to get those artifacts. And now the thing about Lemuel is that he knows all the secret passages in the house. And there are connections in this house, which means that you can move between rooms in kind of a mystical manner if you know the secret doors. The thing about the house is also then that these things are printed so poorly. It's basically like black on blue or purple with a checkered color behind it. It's almost impossible to read. And the links between the room are written in like font 6. So to actually find out what connects where is almost impossible. But we're going to decide on some connections, because I really think, I'm pretty sure in the service of the story that Lemuel is going to have to follow his conscience and try to help Kate. And I think he's going to try to use the information that he gathered from this skull and try to go up and grab one of those artifacts, one of those weird copper mystical diagrams that are up there, and just try to take it and save Kate. And he just knows that this house is overpowered. I think already now the aim is really not to dispel the entity from the house. The aim is probably now to get Kate out alive, because it seems like the house was so well prepared for this. It's just sucking her in. Okay, but Lemuel survived the attack, so he's the only one who is conscious and not stuck somewhere on the astral plane. That's a pretty heavy toll on him. Let's see. Then what happens here? This is the final step now of the turn, which means the clock moves. Dong. It doesn't say dong. It says ding, 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 ding throughout the house as the old grandfather clock chimes. And what we know is that this means that in the next hour, the 7th hour, the familiar, doubly powered familiar is going to come into play. And that's probably not going to be nice either. And we have 2 possessed characters. oh my God, what is this gonna come down to? I am gonna take a break, and then when I come back, we are gonna find out how this whole thing is gonna play out. I have no idea. I feel right now we're in a territory that is not really covered by the rules. So please, guys, help me out. Try to make this work, and let's see if we can somehow move this story in a direction within the framework of the rules. That's basically all I'm hoping for at this point. Swordvander says, is there now 10 hours left? You are so right, Swordvander. There is 10 hours until it's 5 o'clock and everything is over. But by my estimation, it doesn't really look like our friends are gonna last for 10 more hours. This is really tough. All right, guys, I'm gonna take a 5-minute break and I'm gonna be back. I hope that you'll hang in there and watch the follow-up to this dramatic turn of events. This is turn 1 in a game. Just try to consider that. How many turn 1s did you have in games that were this rich in storytelling? See you in a minute. All right, everybody, we are back in the Nightmare House, and we are in a dire situation here. So Kate Darkholm, the last surviving member of the Darkholm family who built the mansion in the mid-19th century, is lying unconscious in the nursery where she spent so many of her childhood hours. Her soul, or her astral self, is lost on the astral plane and cannot be retrieved. It has been disconnected from her body. Her body is down here where her psyche is, and her projection is up here. She cannot move anywhere. This is a moment of extreme terror and difficulty. And I am actually just now checking to see if I forgot to do something. Yes, because what's even worse is that her astral body is kind of being, because it's lost, we will see where it roams. And there is a 1 in 36 chance that it ends back in her body. But, you know, it's very slim. It may wander somewhere else. So let's see. So it is going to be on level 1, 2, 3. It's going to be on level 2. And it's going to be in number 9. So that is over here somewhere. Yeah, it's in the music room. Oh, her astral self is just roaming around, trying to get back to the nursery. But because the layout of the astral realm is different from the physical realm, she keeps getting lost. And she's now in the music room. And the music room is right here. So that's where her astral self is. I think perhaps we can show that by putting this one down here. So her astral self is now in the music room. Great, that's taken care of. And yes, and she's the only one who's lost. And then we have Tim Holt. He's also lying unconscious in the chapel after missing some major clue. This dumbass photographer who was just trying to get his scoop and just missed the essential clue, looked straight up into his past, was completely engulfed by his childhood fears, and is now unconscious and possessed, as is Kate. And then we have Lemuel, who is down in the kitchen making drinks, chatting with a skull who's told him where the magical artifacts can help dispel the tower in the house is. Oh my God, Lemuel. This is where you step into character. He is not really well suited for traveling on the astral plane, though, I must say, but there is just no other choice than Lemuel. So let's move through this. I already picked the power markers for this turn, so just to get you a sense of the numbers game here, right? I have 13 power markers for the house, and 3 for Lemuel, and none for the other characters. So that'll give you an idea of how unbalanced we are right now in the game. It's 7 o'clock, the lights are still on in the house. Not to spoil, but they go out at 8. And then you have to get to the fuse box and turn them back on, which is another nightmare to have to go to the fuse box all the time to get them turned on. And especially with the entity being so strong, it's almost just gonna turn them off every turn until we weaken it. And when the house gets dark, it gets more difficult to move around. Many things get more difficult, but it's still light for this 1 hour at least that we're going into now. And it should be a faster hour than the one that we just had, but let's see about that. There are many unknowns here. I mean, as I said before, we're kind of in a territory where I think the rules don't really cover anymore. So I'm just gonna wing it. And please, if you have any ideas or inspirations or things you'd like to see happen in the game, let me know, and I'll try to implement it as always. It is our game. It is no longer the designers. So the only one who can move is Lemuel, and Lemuel, he is gonna try to make his way up to one of these powerful artifacts. And he knows that up in the guest bedroom, in one of the drawers, is, as we mentioned before, this mystical copper diagram that somehow, if you place it on the ground and sprinkle it with saffron powder and move your hands in circles over it 3 times while muttering 3 mystical syllables, shim, klim, shim, then it will spring into power and aid the exorcism. And he's gonna try to go for that. But he also wants to try to reach Kate. And he is aware enough of the going-ons that he knows that Kate's spirit is in the music room, because he can hear her little childhood fingers, her little 6-year-old self fingers playing on the piano in the music room. There's no one there. There's just this child playing on the piano, constantly making these off sounds and mistakes so jarring to the ears. And while he would have been driven insane by this when Kate was a child, now it's just music to his ears, literally, to have a feeling of where she is. That is how she's making herself known to him. So if he wants to astral project and save her, he needs to find a place that is closely connected to her on the astral plane. And those places could be the housekeeper's room. The housekeeper's room is just over here. So he could go there and he could try to connect to Kate's self and get her out of the astral plane. So I think that is what he's going to do. And then afterwards, he's probably going to go up and try to get that artifact, or at least tell Kate about where the artifact is, because I don't think he is under any delusion that he himself will be able to stand up to this house at all. He just does not have the power to do that. So he downs one of the drinks that he just poured for Holt and Kate. Downs the second one as well. Goes out of the kitchen, down the hallway, into the housekeeper's room, which is adjacent to the music room on the astral plane. He's going to try to connect to Kate from there. Then comes the warding phase. So these wards, these focal points can now move around. But it's getting a little complicated here, because the house is not only in control of these focal points, but now also of Holt and Kate. So perhaps the house is going to try to... The house is probably realizing now that Lemuel has started to work against it. So it's probably going to try to move the focal points closer to him to manifest evil where he is. So let's see if it can do that. This is the housekeeper's room. We have right here, I hope you can follow at home, this here is where we have a spiritual focal point. Next to it, this spiritual focal point is in the chapel, but by moving it one space to the right, it can go down to the housekeeper's room, because they're connected astrally. And since it doesn't need to be where Tim is, because Tim is already unconscious and possessed, it doesn't need to manifest anything near him. So it just moves. It moves over here, and let me just... there. It moves over here. So the focal point focuses energy in the housekeeper's room, and Lemuel immediately knows this. He was trying to sort of sneak out into the housekeeper's room and just astral project into the music room and save Kate, but immediately there's just this surge of energy in the room and everything is shaking, and the knives on the walls of the housekeeper's... Are there knives on the walls of the housekeeper's room? Probably not. But whatever is in the housekeeper's room is just shaking, like drawers and commodes and paintings are falling down walls, and the energy is really strong here. So then we have the new horns only come later. Okay, so then what happens is that the familiar manifests, and now we have to find out what this familiar is. So again, you look in the Ares magazine and read about the familiar. I mean, this mechanic of having tokens in the game that just have a name, and then you have paragraphs describing them in the rule book to make them come more alive. I think that's again another weird, innovative idea, and it's not perhaps like the best idea, but it does still have that effect that you get, like it said blood on the other counter, it says familiar. You have kind of an idea of what it is, but you don't really know if it's, what exactly it is, and is it good? Is it bad? Is it something that can help you? So it kind of gives you some information, but then you only get the full information when you read the paragraph. And of course, if you play this game many times, you'll get to know these paragraphs because there's only one for every counter. But let's face it, how many times are you going to play this game? And if you know a couple of counters already, that's fine. There's also a lot of counters that you're never going to see. So I think this will at least hold up for several plays before you feel that you've gone through the counters. And, realistically, this is an experience game. You probably played once or twice, and then you played Nightmarehouse, and that's all you need. It's not like a repeat play game, I'm pretty sure. Unless you're really, really starved for games and stranded on a deserted island, which of course happens. Let's see what this familiar is. Okay, guys. It's Lilith's sleek black cat, Dweomer, materializes in your presence and leaps at the face of whoever is nearest to it, clawing and scratching at their eyes. So this is Kate's mother, Lilith's cat, Dweomer, who materializes out of thin air in the housekeeper's room. It comes up from this basket of dirty laundry. Suddenly the lid is pushed aside and this cat just leaps out and into the face of Lemoine and starts scratching at him, screaming with an almost human-like voice. Wow. That's what it was. So it'll come here. And then we also get to move the other characters. Now, what I'm thinking, and let me know if you think I have faulty thinking in this regard, but what I'm thinking is, what does the house want to achieve here? I mean, it possessed it possessed Kate, Lilith's daughter, and it possessed Holt. I think it sees Holt as a problem, because Holt is the one who actually convinced Kate to come to the house, but he's also the one who may draw attention to the house, and the house doesn't want attention. The house doesn't want to be on the front page of the New Yorker. It's Holt that wants to be on the front page of the New Yorker. Or was it the New York Times? I think it was the New York Times. So I think what he wants to do, since Holt is unconscious and possessed, and Kate is unconscious and possessed, that he wants Kate to do something really nasty to Holt. So, where do we meet? They have plenty of movement. So the question is, where will this take place? So I think, what is a good dramatic setting for a meeting between these two possessed bodies? Is it the graveyard? Is it the top of the stairs? Perhaps it's that. Perhaps it is the top of the stairs. Perhaps it is Holt
He just stands up and his eyes are completely blanked out. He is not there. His psyche is trapped in the chapel, and his body is just moving out into the portrait gallery. And as he walks down the portrait gallery, he's like trapped inside his own body. He can see out his eyes inside that body, and he looks at these portraits and he just recognizes that the degeneracy that he saw in the portraits is the degeneracy of this evil power that has possessed Josiah when he built this house, or when he went to the east and studied these mysteries. So what he sees is basically evil taking on a human shape through generations. And Laura Ray suggests the library with flying books. I'm all for a library of flying books. So what happens is that Tim wakes up. He walks down this portrait gallery and through the corridor and descends into the last of the portraits, which is just like pure evil in the barest physical form. And he looks at it and he recognizes the warnings that he didn't see when he went up that gallery earlier, just an hour ago. He breaks into the main hall, and from upstairs he hears these gargles, cries of Kate, and he wants to run up and save her, or rather, perhaps, run out of the house, because the exit is right here. But he's not in control of his own body. He's just a witness to his own body at this point. And he walks into the library. There, in the library, on the lectern, there is a book, and it's already opened to this one page. And he goes there and he starts reading from that page in a voice that, reading out these words that he don't understand in a voice that seems to come from somewhere else. And he's just using his vocal cords to manifest itself. At the same time, Kate goes into the second floor. She walks down the stairs stiffly, weirdly, like a child, perhaps more likely. She's singing, she's dancing, she's sliding down the railing on the stairs. She's playing as if she was a child, completely innocent. She has her hands behind her back as she opens the door to the library, and she goes in, and she stands there looking at Tim, who is reading from this book, and he looks up into her eyes, and she takes her two hands and she places them against his throat, and she just tries to squeeze, and as he reads the words that comes out of his mouth, they just become tinier and tinier as he squeezes his windpipe more and more and more in his throat. And Tim, of course, normally would have resisted with all his might. But since he is in the possession, the entity just lets it happen. And with the final syllable that emerges from his throat before his windpipe is closed for good by Kate's hands, unleashes a terrible spell in the room that has all the books flying out of the bookcases across the room. It's just completely covered in loose sheets that are floating through the air, covering the floor as Tim, he sinks down on the floor and he lies there, and the life goes out of his eyes, and his psyche finally retreats back into his body. And just for a moment, he looks out his own eyes and he looks up into the eyes of Kate, and what he sees is Kate's face transformed into that face which he has always feared, the face of his deepest childhood fears that he's seen manifesting in every possible texture he ever looked at, and now sees as clear as the light of day in the face of Kate. And he knows that contacting her to do this job, to have her return to the house and photograph her encounter with it and photograph the spirits in it, was the worst mistake he ever made. And it's the last thing he sees before he is sucked back into the astral void, and his body now lingering at the center of the circle, the entity feeding off its spiritual power. That was Tim Holt, guys. He didn't get his article. He didn't even really...
There are some undeveloped photos in his camera, but they're mostly just of, slabs from the chapel, a few inscriptions. Perhaps on one of the photos, there is something revealing that later people who come into the house looking to find out what happened to these people, they will just find the camera in this library, which is in a complete mess. It looks like somebody just ransacked the library. And then there's just this camera. There is no body. And they'll take the film and they'll develop it. And they'll zoom in on one of these deep, dark niches in the chapel. And they're all zoomed in. They'll see very faintly on the back of the wall of the niche the face of Josiah Darkholm in sort of a semi-translucent state, just staring out from back in there. And it's just the house staring Tim in the face, and he never saw it because he was too obsessed with getting a good photo. Laura Ray says that everything was faded. Yeah, I think it is. I've been rolling a lot of dice, I've been drawing a lot of power markers, but I do also feel that my hand has been guided by something else. So right now, we have Kate as a walking corpse in the library, Tim Holt strangled at her feet, and Lemuel now being besieged by the cat of Kate's mother, Lilith, which is attacking him, trying to claw out his eyes. Let's see how that goes. Okay. I have to... Yeah, that was... Tim is out of the photo. Oh, and Tim, as I said, has a gun. I think Lilith is just gonna grab down and pick out that gun. Now, the thing is that normally a possessed character... Oh yeah, that's true. A possessed character, when they attack someone, they become unpossessed. Which means that Lilith is no longer possessed, at least not for now, but since she's still lost on the astral plane, she cannot come back to her body. And her body is now where? I mean, her body is in the library? Where even is the library? And where even is... Where is anything right now? Sorry. Where I'm completely confused by myself here. This is Tim. He's out. And this is Lemuel, Psyche, which should be here. Good. And then I just need to find... Where is Kate's... Does anyone know? Here is Kate's Psyche. It was in the nursery, now it's in the music room. Where is the music room? The music room is down here, right? No, sorry, it's in the library. It's in the library. Where is the library? So, I mean, this is also where you can see the game gets a little bit complicated, just trying to find out where things are in this gigantic map of tiny counters with tiny script on them. Here. So this one is not in the library. It should be in the nursery. Okay, I messed up a little bit. There we go. It's okay. There's a focal point in the nursery. There's a focal point in the housekeeper's room. And right now we have Kate's astral body is in the... Kate's astral body is in the music room, and her psyche is been transported to the library where her body is. So they're quite close together, actually. But still, she needs someone to come save her. Luckily, Lemuel is close. That's why he went in there. But the thing is, what happens when this cat attacks him? It attacks him with a strength of 4 plus 2 and 2, so with a strength of 8. And it is unfortunately a psychic attack, which means that Lemuel only has a strength of 3, and he's not carrying... Oh, he's carrying a Bible. He is carrying a Bible. Completely forgot about that. He's a man of the Holy Book. That's the only thing that keeps him sane in all this. And, the house lets him have his little delusions for himself. But it turns out that the Bible do have some power. Not necessarily because the Bible has power, but because the belief in the Bible has power. And that's what manifesting. So it gives him up to 5. So the house is at 8 and Lemuel is at 5. So the house gets to, 14. He can't make that, even though he gets to 11. So still, the house wins. And as Swordman has said before, the house always wins. In this playthrough of the game, that certainly seems to be true. So, what happens? It's a psychic haunt, so it drains some of Lemuel's power. So this very vital power that he was meant to use to save Kate is being drained by the house. And the house, he has 2 1s and a 4, so of course it drains his 4. So he's now down to 2 in power, and the house is just tons. His soul also loses some of his stamina, but he was at 12. He's down to 11, so, that's a long way gone. Then we need to check if he panics, and we check that by rolling a die, and if it's equal to or higher than his psychic strength, he panics. Oh, so on a 1 or 2, he doesn't panic. He panics. Not surprisingly, but this is horrible because you'll see why it's horrible. So he goes into the housekeeper's room because he knows it's attached to the music room spiritually, and he can hear Kate playing the piano in the music room. Oh, that was what I was doing, right? I put it in the music room. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So he hears it, but he's attacked then by the spiritual manifestation of Lilith's cat. It claws him in the face. It rips out a part of his soul, and he panics. So we need a panic marker for him. Just show the panic marker. These are all kind of look similar, as you might have noticed, but you have to keep track of them in order to play the game. So he panics, he loses some of his soul, and then the house gets to move him away. So what does the house do? Well, it moves him, of course, completely out of reach of Kate. So where is it going to move him? 1, 2, or does it move him into Kate's room? Does he... Because does it hope to possess... Help me out here, guys. So, Lemuel just panicked. The house has control over him. Right now, Lemuel is spiritually close or astrally close to Kate. So, what does the house want? To move him as far away from Kate's astral self as possible, or to move him into the room where Kate is physically unconscious, hoping that it'll be able to possess her again, or possess him and do something terrible to him? Or does it just want to scare him and have him keep him? Because it also likes that there is a caretaker, right? It just doesn't like the caretaker helping the house. But it certainly doesn't want him in the housekeeper's room where he's close to the astral plane of Kate. Now, what is furthest away? Let's see. The tea room. Far away, says Laurie. Okay, we do far away. So, the tea room. The tea room is up here, physically, but on the astral plane, it's very far away. I don't know. It's very far away from her. So this is a great option for the house. So the house is going to have him run down the service corridor, through the main hall, and just into the tea room. And it's just going in there, and this tea room, which is just... It's so pristinely kept. Everything is set up as if a tea party could happen any moment. There's the finest, thinnest, almost translucent porcelain on the trays, and these beautiful divans where people are sitting, where people can sit, and silver trays to hold the teapots, and everything is set up in the nicest possible way. And he just runs in there. The door slams behind him. He's standing with his hands to his head, completely panicked out of his mind, but at least that cat is out of his face, and he's now there in the tea room. Great. So that was the hauntings. We lost Tim, and there is a possibility of searching, but there's nothing to find in the tea room, and anyway, he's panicked. So that's not really going to work for Lemuel. So what we have now is that we have this astral thing. So what can we actually do? I mean, of course, Lemuel's psyche will now be up here in the tea room. And his panicked self will be there. He cannot possibly astral project over to Kate, and anyway, he's panicked, so I don't think that he can astral project at all. I think he's just in the tea room, just like, perhaps just furiously trying to clean things, put things in order, not knowing what to do, just walking around in circles, just pretending as if everything is normal, while he's still hearing, like right next door, he can hear the notes of the 6-year-old Kate playing on the piano with all the mistakes that she's making. So this is going horribly. There will be no astral projection. There will be no even attempt. We've only had one attempt at exorcism, and it failed horribly, and no one can exorcise anything given the state of the game right now. So instead, we move directly to the possession phase, where the house will attempt to encroach upon the minds of the characters in the game. So let's see what it does. First, it can move its focal powers around. Is that interesting? It might want to move a focal point into the library, where the psyche of Kate is. So that is from the nursery. So it moves from the nursery into the library, just following Kate around. They cannot escape this energy. It's too strong. They shouldn't have gone in here. It's a horrible mistake. It's been a horrible mistake all around. And the other focal point, of course, can move just one space, because even though he ran so far away... Oh, sorry. This is where she's lost here. So perhaps it'll try to move. It can move 3 spaces. Cannot really get up to Lemuel. So perhaps it's just gonna go where her soul is, just to try to somehow clamp down on that. So it's going to the music room. Yeah, okay. So this is Kate's body. This is Kate's astral self, and the 2 focal powers of the house are in those 2 spaces. And Lemuel is in the tea room behind shut doors, just screaming in fear and anguish. And basically going out of his mind. And then the house try to possess them. So, let's see. The house can attack with how many? It can use up to the number of hunters, and there are only 2 left. So it can only attack with 2. So that's okay. So it's going to attack full strength on Lemuel in the hope of possessing him. And it's also going to attack full strength on Kate, trying to possess her. So in the tea room, Lemuel is banging at the door with his fist. Just let me out of here. But the door does not budge. It's like he's rattling the handle and nothing absolutely happens. And he feels this dark energy which just surges up through the floor and into his body. And the house comes at him with a power of 8, which is the maximum power it can come with. It was very lucky right there. And he throws in his big defense, which is 2. So the house is already now at a +6. But because it's Lemuel and he has a sort of a natural defense because he has this affinity with the house. He actually has a +3. So the house is at 8 and Lemuel is at 5. The house at 8 plus, house is only at 9. Lemuel is at 5 and 8, 9, it's still not enough. Oh no. Oh no. It actually means that what the house can do right now is that it can possess Lemuel. Yeah. I mean, the other option is to basically chip away at the soul of Lemuel, but it puts it from 11 to 10. And then the house would just have to do that a million times in order to possess his soul and have him run around and try to foul or try to impede the house's attempt at doing something to Kate. And even though Kate is not possessed at the moment, we have to remember, I think it has to possess Lemuel. It just knows, like, it has to take control of these characters. So it does. What a frightfully horrible outcome. What a horrible, horrible outcome. Let's see. So Lemuel is possessed. He's not unconscious, but I'm gonna flip his soul to the possessed side. And I'm gonna flip his counter to the possessed side. Oh, yeah, that's how you do it. Flip it. So he is possessed. Yeah, so suddenly calm falls upon the tea room and Lemuel just sits down on the couch and he takes one of those empty cups of teas and he puts it to his lips and he pours that imaginary tea into his throat while he's listening to the jarring sounds of the piano that Kate's childhood fingers are playing inside, and he's hearing these discordant notes. It's the most beautiful, soothing music that he's ever heard. He is possessed by the house. Swordvanska asks how many conscious people are left. Well, Lemuel is conscious but possessed, and Kate is unconscious but not possessed. How that plays out, I'm not really sure, but what I do know is that the house is now trying to possess her unconscious body again. And it does so, oh my goodness, with a strength of 5. And what does Kate actually have? She has no psychic energy to defend against it, so she's at a -5. And she's actually liable to be possessed. She's at a -6, so she actually cannot even defend at a -6. She is actually auto-possessed. So Kate immediately becomes possessed, and this familiar, by the way, the cat, we have to throw that out back into the mix. And Kate is possessed, everyone is possessed, and Tim is dead. Oh my goodness, that's even worse. So yeah, so that's it. So she becomes possessed, and no one is panicked anymore. They're just possessed, which is a different kind of panic, I guess. Yes. And then, well, the clock strikes 8. They have been in the house for 2 hours. Tim Holt is dead from the hands of Kate Darkholm. The rebel caretaker, Lemuel, has also been possessed, and he's in the tea room. And Kate is unconscious and possessed in the library, hovering over the corpse of Holt. There's not a lot of good ways out of this situation, I think. So what I think we're going to do is that we're going to take a short break, and then I'm going to come back with a little bit more lore, and also the conclusion to this I did not anticipate this, guys. This is the most, this went as bad as it could, and it's probably on me for being too greedy with trying to exercise something at the core of the house on the first turn of the game, which is probably a complete no-go, but what do I know? I'm just playing, right? So anyway, I'll be back in 5 minutes, and yeah, we'll conclude this little adventure. So I hope that you're gonna hang on. I'm also gonna have a little bit of lore to share with you before we finish up the game. Thank you. See you shortly. All right, guys. Welcome back to the conclusion of Nightmarehouse. So I kind of want to recap for you here because we are in a deadlock situation in the game. So we have been investigating Darkholm Manor, and Kate Darkholm, the last surviving member of the Darkholm family, has returned to the house together with photographer from New York Times, Tim Holt, to make a feature story about her childhood and the house, and hopefully taking some photos of some spirits and dispelling whatever evil resided in the house. And they were led on by Lemuel, the caretaker, who let them into the house and guided them around, who was in some kind of connection to the house. And what happened basically was that Kate was possessed by the house, who sucked her back into her childhood trauma because she went straight up into the nursery, which she should never have done. But it was the room that she was drawn to, and she basically just lost the battle with the overpowering entity of the house. She underestimated it. She thought that she had more power than she did, but she discovered that her power is just a fraction of the power of the house. And Tim Holt, of course, turned out to be a little bit of a blabbering idiot. He was just there to get some nice photos. Didn't really work out for him. He got possessed, and he was actually strangled by Kate, who was also possessed. And Lemuel, the caretaker, he tried to rebel against the house, one last feeble attempt, but he was very quickly shut down. And the house didn't do anything to him. It just possessed him and decided that, we cannot have Lemuel walk around with his own free will anymore. So it took control over him. So what happens in the following days and weeks will surprise most of the people who live in the village next to the manor or at the foot of the hill, because they start seeing cars, trucks come by with stuff, furniture, goods, items, clothes, everything is being transported from somewhere out of state. And Kate Darkholm, she announces that she'll be moving back into her childhood home. And she does come off as a little bit like changed. Like, she has this career as a medium. She's well known in the world of spiritualism. She leads many seances, but she suddenly decides to leave all that behind, announces that she's going to withdraw and that she's going to retire in her childhood home, and that she has found her true calling by visiting that. And people are not quite sure how to react to it. Why this sudden change? But then again, people grow older, people go wiser, people look back in their past and they reconcile. And that becomes the dominant story, that Kate has reconciled with her childhood and her mother, who committed suicide in the lake right outside that house. So she basically moves back in. And Lemuel continues to be her loyal servant, and he moves in with her. And life goes on in the house as it always did. There are no more husbands, there are no more children. There is just Kate, who lives in the house, and Lemuel, the servant, who helps her about. And with regards to Tim Holt, well, kind of in an ironic turn of events, he gets his wish fulfilled, because he does actually get his picture on the front page. But it's just not really the picture that he wanted on the front page. There are some investigators that are sent to the house after he doesn't report back. His wife reports him missing. Some investigators found out what's been going on. They visit the house and they come up to it and they make a search of the house and
Kate is there and Lemuel is there, and they're very helpful. And they say, yeah, Tim was here and he took some photos and he spent the night, and the next morning he left, and that was the last we saw of him. But one attentive investigator, he notices a camera tucked away in the back of a cupboard in one of the guest rooms. And without anyone noticing, he takes that camera and he puts it into his bag and he leaves with it, and he has the film developed. And the film that he develops has the pictures from the chapel of these old inscriptions with names and dates of the people who died. And there is also that one mysterious photo which becomes famous worldwide. It's the Darkholm Chapel photo. It's kind of a photo of a niche where you can slide in a coffin and it can rest there until it is buried. So it can lie there in a kind of as a wake or waiting to be buried. But it's empty, but there's a photo inside it. And it's partly obscured by cobweb, partly obscured by like the deep shadows in there. But still, at the very back, if you zoom in, if you enlarge it, if you develop it in certain ways, using certain new techniques that are coming out in the 1930s, you do see something in there. And people argue what it is that you see on that. It's on the, mind you, it's on the cover of the New York Times. It's just these dark, blurry photos. No one has ever put such a photo on the cover of New York Times. There's nothing striking about it at all. But it is claimed in the article that it is an example of spirit photography, and that if you look very closely at those little dots at the back of the niche and those like the features, like this face-like outline that is in there in the deep, and if you fix your eyes on those eyes and you look at the same time at the photo right next to it on the front page of the New York Times, the mugshot of Tim Holt. And what Tim Holt has photographed is the face of his own death in the coffin niche in the Darkholm Chapel. And that becomes the story. And no one knows where Tim is, but everyone presumes that he's dead. Many people suspect that Kate and Lemuel have a hand in it, but there is no proof. There is no body. The house is ransacked from bottom to end and nothing is found, and they just have to leave, and the story will linger. But as a story, it's just one of so many stories that are being told about this house. The story of Josiah and how he hung himself from the top of the balcony on the second floor, and the story of Alistair, his son, who slit his throat in the cellar and was found dead with a razor in his hand. The story of Lilith and how she one night just went out into the garden, walked into the lake and disappeared under the water and was found floating with her arms stretched out like a cross in the middle of the lake the next morning. And now also the story of Tim Holt, who photographed his own death in the chapel, or so they say. And, time moves on. Things continue. And Kate grows old and Lemuel grows old and they live in the house and the stories continue, and in the villages, everything is as it was really a century before. Like the kids in the village who are afraid of the house and are told not to go there by their parents, but still they sneak up and they dare each other to climb the fence and go into the garden and maybe steal an apple. And then they see the face of Kate in the window, and just one look at her face, just this weird, pale, alabaster face in the window staring out at them, will make them jolt back and jump across the fence with their prized possession and run away from the house and never dare go there again. And so it is that the story of Darkholm Manor, the nightmare house, continues, and more importantly, the legacy of Josiah Darkholm, who built the house,
continues with Kate. And I don't know how long we're going to follow this story, but I know that even today, Kate still lives there. And for a long time, people have talked about the old lady living in the house. And she is an old lady, but she's been an old lady for a long time. And her servant has been an old servant for a long time. And still, life continues. And occasionally, she has visitors from out of state. And some even look like they're out of country. Maybe they're even not from a continent that is much visited by people in these parts. And that is really where the story winds down, with Darkholm Manor, after decades of having been abandoned, having regained its life, but the life it has regained may be a life that is closer aligned with the astral plane and less with the physical plane. The barrier has broken down. And who knows? Maybe one day that spiritual nexus that the houses will spread to other localities around it, but that'll be for a future scenario. And Swordvander says, we will never quell the madness in a place so utterly consumed by cosmic cruelty. That is true. I think it was probably fool's errand to return to that house. And also remember, it wasn't really Kate's idea. She didn't want anything to do with that house. It was only because of Tim, who, so desperately wanted that front page, and who came up with this great idea to go into the house and just photograph the shit out of it and bring Kate along and put a face-to-face with her childhood drama. I think it's almost as if that story is a commentary on modern media, right? In this world of reality TV, where you just take people and push them way beyond their limit because, it's gonna be hurtful, but you're gonna be a face on TV for 2 days or whatever, and then you're gonna live with that trauma for the rest of your life of whatever it is that we pushed you to, and that is pretty much the story here, right? It is this drive to make a mark in the world against really all common sense that has led to this whole debacle and basically played into the House of the Hands. And perhaps, as Laura Ray suggested earlier when she said that everything is fated, that maybe it was fated. Maybe because we know that Tim, he was a kid around that house. We know that he used to come there, and that was one of the things that attracted to him, and that was why he wanted to return to that house and really photograph it. So maybe the house just had like the tiniest of claws in him and just pushed his buttons and made Kate return to that house so she could continue the Darkholm lineage. And that was the play all along. So I'm not even sure I've been playing a game here. I think maybe I've just been going through the motions of whatever the house told me to do. And I have just been, the architect of, or not been the architect, I have been, the errand boy of the house architect, which has manipulated this entire scenario. The Swordvander says, an insanity engine. Yeah. So, let's talk a little bit about the game here. As you can see, the rules for this game are like convoluted in the extreme. It's so procedural. There's so many tiny little edge cases, and all the rolls you have to make have modifiers, and the modifiers are never intuitive. They're always like, there are 12 different characters you can play. I only played 3 of them. There are 12 different characters. Each character have their own backstory. You can mix and match, and characters have like different positives and negatives that you can use in the game. But it just means that there are so many modifiers, not just in the game itself, but also depending on which characters you're playing. So it's really, really hard to keep track of anything in the game without a proper... I feel like this game should just have... The rule should just have been like bullet points, do this, do that, and then you would have the game. But it's also... the rules become a constraint because they are not intuitive. Like, the broadest outline you can draw is that the investigators, they make a move in the physical plane, then the house make a move in the physical plane, then the investigators make a move on the astral plane, then the house makes a move on the astral plane, and back and forth it goes. That's the basic structure of the game. But there are so many other phases stuck in between this that you just end up going through this procedural chart over and over. And unless you invest in the storytelling, this is going to be it's going to be such a drag to go through it. But I do think, as we saw here in Aspect, that there really is a strong potential for drama and for storytelling and for simulation in this game, because it's constructed in this way it is, that it has all these ideas put into it. The rules formula, the algorithm is pretty horrible, but you can easily take, there's so many ideas in this game, you can easily take 1 or 2 or 3 of them and just mold them into something different. I think there are at least 4 different games going on in this game, and each one of them would be a good game in its own right. It's so fresh. This is from 1983. This is from a period where horror games were tongue-in-cheek, drop a skull through a tower and see where it goes, or roll and move with the Addams Family crap, right? And this is a game which really, really tries to be serious. And we read 3-4 paragraphs, and I think there are 40, 50 paragraphs in the game that you can read. So we also only scratch the surface, and the idea is that these paragraphs you read, they will also reveal part of the puzzle in the game. So if you read the backstory and you then read the different prompts in the game, they will add to that backstory. I mean, we have that drama down here, for example, where there was the manifestation of Lilith's cat. And of course, you need to know that Lilith is the mother of Kate, and that Lilith drowned in the lake outside, and that her cat is trying to draw Kate back into the house. So there are all these layers of meaning that the game adds. But I think for most players, this game would probably just, die on the altar of complex procedural rules, which is a shame. Laura Ray says the Astral Wheel has 65 spaces. The Astral Wheel has 36 rooms, 36 spaces which are linked to room, 12 axes, which is 48, and then the entity is number 49, and it can be in 3 different positions. And basically now it was in position 7. It could also be in position 6 or 5. And then if you conquer it in position 5, it retreats to position 7. Conquer it in position 6. If you defeat it there, it moves into the center. If you defeat in the center, you defeat the entity that controls the house. And I don't think that's impossible to do, actually. I do think it is possible if you want to game it. I had 0 interest in gaming it. I just wanted to see I chose some characters. I made up some motivation on the fly as we were playing along, and I tried to use the prompts that we got to try to develop a little bit of backstory for them, and then see where it took me. And then I just, played the logic of the game. And when you play like that, the rules are almost a kind of resistance to your own storytelling, but it's also an interesting resistance. It's like being creative and having a creative restraint that says, well, you can tell any story you like, but, right now you have to make a possession roll. I kind of like that challenge. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think it is one of the things that I like the most about simulation games, because honestly, why don't we just do role-playing games? Like I was telling you about my experiences playing Call of Cthulhu as a kid and how extremely powerful that was. And I mean, for all intents and purposes, this book, published in 1989, and I think I got it in 1989, and it's the same copy, right? This book just changed my life. It opened a vista of a alternative reality in my mind that that is with me to this day. I was on a trajectory of being a kid and liking games and going to school and playing soccer and writing notes to girls and passing them to them in class and all these traditional stuff. And then I got this book and my life just changed. It tilted. It became something different. And I'm sure there are people out there who bemoan the fact that I took a turn for the worse. And I want to share with you a funny story, which is that this book actually was given to me by my grandparents. And the thing was that I was, where I grew up, when you're like, what are you, 13 years old or something, and you have to do your communion, or you have to confirm your faith. I was baptized as a kid by my parents. I certainly didn't choose to be baptized, but my parents chose to baptize me. And so, like, when you're a young teenager, you have to confirm the faith, basically, that was invested in you through the baptism. And I, of course, didn't want to do that. And my grandparents, they were, I won't say they were religious, because they weren't, but they were conservative. And they felt that even though you don't believe in this shit, you have to confirm your faith. You just cannot not do it. So it was a big scandal that I didn't want to confirm my faith. My parents, I think, didn't care so much, but my grandparents did. And I was told, I remember to my face, that I was not going to get any presents because I did not confirm my faith. And I was like, that's fine. Normally when you confirm your faith, you have like a big party. And I was like, well, I'm not going to have a party. Why should that? Would be like hypocrisy to have a party. I'm not going to confirm my faith or anything. And they were like, but you're not getting any presents from us. I was like, yeah, I'm fine. All right, no matter. And then later, I had my birthday. And at that birthday, I remember getting more presents from my parents than usual, which was probably because they felt that because I decided not to have a party, that my birthday should be something special. And, I thought it was hypocrisy, but fine, okay. They give me some more presents. I'm just a kid, right? But what happens then is that my grandparents are not in on this deal at all. So they suddenly see my parents giving me more gifts, and they just come with their sort of usual gifts. And they just could not have that sitting on them. They're like, oh my God, we've been shamed. We have been given too few gifts to this guy who we actually don't like because he doesn't confirm his faith, but what the fuck, we need to give him more gifts. So the week after my birthday, suddenly, unannounced, my grandparents come to our house for coffee, and they just show up one afternoon. And everyone is perplexed that why are they showing up? They were just here last week for my birthday party. And then they show up and they carry this bag full of presents because they want to right the wrong that they felt that they did. Because even though, just because I'm not following, the conservative laws of conduct, they certainly will. And what they had done was that they had looked, I guess, at one of my old wish lists or something for Christmas, where I had written this unpronounceable Call of Cthulhu thing, and they were just like, okay, we got to give him whatever at the top of his list so we are not shamed. So my grandparents, who were opposed to me confirming my faith, ended up giving me this book, having no clue what was in it, having no clue what it would do to me, having no clue that if they thought that I was a rebel for not confirming my faith, the rebel that I would turn into from reading this book, they could never, ever have imagined. So thank you, grandparents, for being so fucking conservative that you, out of your own sense of shame, decided to give me this book and send me down this path that leads me to so many years later sit here with you guys and play Nightmarehouse, which is basically the logical successor to the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. Yeah, so let's see. Swordvander says you became possessed. Yeah, I guess so. I did have in my kids' room. I had a room, and in the room there was a small door leading out to some kind of annex or something. I don't really know what the word is. It's called a skunk in Danish, but I don't know what a skunk is. It's like a like a crawl space or something. And that crawl, there was this tiny door into this crawl space. And I was convinced that that was where the cosmic horror was, that it was located in the crawl space. So I painted an elder sign from this book on there, and I wrote in Arabic, which took me forever because I didn't know the Arabic alphabet. But I copied, like just like one-to-one, like an illustration, the Arabic translation, or what's supposed to be the Arabic original of this saying that appears in Lovecraftian lore, that that is not dead which can eternal lie, yet with strange aeons even death may die. This is like a very famous quote from the Cthulhu Mythos, and in the 1989 edition that I just showed you, it is printed in Arabic because it's supposed to be written by an Arabic author in the 8th century, Abdul al-Hasrat, the mad Arab, as they called him. So I copied this onto the door out to my crawl space together with an elder sign. And I remember having friends coming by and saying, "Oh, what a cool drawing you had," or "What are these weird letters, what does that mean?" And me just being like deadly serious, that's just, to keep out the cosmic horror at the core of your existence, and not joking about it. And then people would just drop the subject and talk about something else. So this book changed my life, and my grandparents are to blame, or to thank, I guess, which is more like how I would see it. And this was a long digression from just saying that these kind of games are attempts at taking role-playing games like Call of Cthulhu, which can deliver these really strong emotional experiences, and putting them onto a system which cannot deliver the same emotional experiences. When you play games, when you play story games, you can immerse yourself in a character, but the thing about board games is that board games are really systems. So what you immerse yourself in is more like a system. So you have to somehow be able to wrap your head around that and enjoy that you're immersed now, not in a character as much as in a system. And I think that is what fascinates me here, that the system, for example, of this astral overlay onto the physical map of the house is, it just endlessly fascinates me how I can travel on the astral plane from the housekeeper's room to the music room to try to save this lost soul, which then moves somewhere else, and suddenly it's elsewhere on the physical map, it's elsewhere on the astral map, and it's a kind of systems thinking that is part and parcel of board games, and it's not that same emotional attachment that you have in other media, and especially in role-playing games. But I like to invest story into these games and be constrained by the system, and then say, okay, so within the system, how maximally can I get sort of an emotional payoff from engaging with it? It's the weirdest exercise. It's chasing unicorns in the forest, but I love it, and I love the hopelessness of it, and which is of course why it's on the hopeless stream. I just love, not abandoning, but just aiming so high that it becomes impossible, and that it's whatever ambition you might have by playing such a game, it's just futile. Like, all ambition here is futile, but you're still trying to say, what can this game somehow, what can it teach me? What can I get out of it? How can I transform this into being not just little chits of cardboard moving around on a map, but really something that manifests itself? And I know that the story that we went through this evening, rough as it is, because, it's made up on the fly. It's like nothing is really pre-programmed here. So it's everything is improvised. So with all its flaws and everything, this story is gonna stay with me. And to me, it's really a story, I think, about these ambitions that drive you beyond that level of comfort, or
you kind of know when you cross that barrier, right? It's like you're driven by something else, but now you can get to do this, you can get to do that, and you know you're crossing barriers, and you know you're not supposed to do that. You know it's gonna go wrong, but there is a drive inside you. It's so exciting. You know, there's money, there's wealth, there's fame, there's adventure, there's all these things, and it pushes you and pushes you and pushes you, and you know you're beyond your limit. You know you're far beyond your limit, but you just still keep on going with you. And at some point, the most beautiful and interesting things that develop from it is the fall, the endless fall through existence of someone who jumped too far and didn't land on stable ground. And that is really beautiful. Laura Ray says, balance between emotional experience and constraint. Awesome. Yeah. I think it's something you have to wrap your head around, because, I mean, many people will rightfully say that these games are flawed and unplayable and stupid and whatnot, but they allow me to tell stories that, and I'm speaking generally, but a game like a Nightmare House allows me to tell a story that most other games will not allow me, because their constraints are different. Their constraints are about mechanical balance, whereas Nightmare House is all about edge case. It's like, which crazy fucking game can you project yourself onto an astral plane and become unconscious in your room, and then later become possessed and have your psyche move into a different room? There are four different markers to track each character, and each of those four different markers have two sides. There's so many states that the characters can be in, and it's just represented by four bits of cardboard with two sides, and one side is basically legible, but that's beside the point. So I'm trying to, I think I'm trying to break through something when I play these games, trying to get into the core and have them unfold, because someone designed this. David Marshall, who designed this in 1983, he never designed he didn't publish any games before or after this. This may have been his one-off design. You can imagine perhaps he'd written this game as a RPG scenario and he turned it into a board game. Who knows? I haven't been able to really find anything about his story, but you can sense the ambition, and I want to get at what is it that he's trying to achieve? What is it that he's trying to tell? And can I make that come alive with these impossible constraints? Because when you play role-playing games, of course, you can just tell the story as you want, and that is cool. And I've done that a million times, and I've loved it. But I've also come to a point where I really like this dynamic between having some kind of system and then try to rebel against that system. Because the thing, role-playing games also have systems, but I often played role-playing games without any systems, and you could do whatever you want. But I really like the tension of going up against the system. I mean, it almost becomes political, right? You have a game like Nightmare House, which has all these constraints and all these systems running, and you're trying to break the system, or you're trying to push the system into a different form, and the system constantly tries to snap back to its original form, but you're pushing against it. And I think there's like a basic desperation in me that just likes to keep on challenging these systems and just never, ever conform. So no, I'll never confirm my faith, but by keep challenging that, you suddenly get this stroke of luck that your grandparents gift you this game, which basically changes your life. So yeah, horror is a genre that's really dear to me, and I'm a great fan of what Nightmare House is trying to do, and a great fan of so many ideas from this game. They're not very well executed, and again, we're talking about a first-time designer probably, so it's understandable, but oh my god, can you imagine something like this would never get published today? It's just impossible. It could not happen. So to go back in time when there were no really, there weren't the same conventions about design, because today I think most designers would just stop themselves before they did some kind of madness like this. But those
conventions didn't really exist at the time, which is why I love these early games. The media feels so fresh, so young. People are experimenting left and right. A lot of it is failing, but oh my god, the ideas in these kind of games. So this is not going to be the last Ares game that I'm going to stream. I was really happy to do it because it was a proper horror game and one of the earliest horror games. And I do want to say a few more words, because I told you in the beginning that when we're going through the history of the early horror games, from Ye Witchcraft game by Parker Brothers from 80-89 that was withdrawn because of sensitivity issues, all the way up to Betrayal at House on the Hill from 2004, which became a major success. I did hint that between Arkham Horror and Betrayal at House on the Hill, there was one other game that has really been competing for being the most successful horror board game in history. And now that is a game that is slightly later. It only came out in 2011. And it is called Mansions of Madness. And if you're into horror board games, you probably know this game. It was published by Fantasy Flight Game in 2011 by Cory Koshnika. I'm not pronouncing that right, sorry, Cory. And I got it back there in 2011, and I thought, well, this is really an attempt at making a Call of Cthulhu into a board game. And at that point, I was not really playing a lot of role-playing games or board games for that sake either. And I thought, well, this is a nice way to get back into the whole gaming hobby and try this out. And let's try this thing. It's probably stupid, but let's try it. And I played this game, and I think I have an image here of, let me just see how it looks. Yeah. So this is basically how it looks. You put down tiles and you build a mansion out of the tiles. You have investigators that move around and search the different rooms, and you collect kind of clue points to discover what the whole story is about. And you can see these sort of plastic behemoths in the background, which are kind of monsters spawning in the game that you then have to fight. And that was the game. And it was one of those games, again, that has like a lot of ideas. It was so ambitious. It really wanted to tell stories, but it was also really shackled by its rules and by the demand for replayability. And I was like, why do you have to be able to play the same story in 10 different ways when each of those 10 different ways are weaker than if you just said this story can only be played in one way, you can only play it one time, but it's going to be a blast when you play it, and forget about those 9 other times that you're supposed to play it. That's just a waste of time. Let me see here. Before I go on, in the comment section, we have Swordvander saying, one of the amazing features of horror as a genre is that it can easily contain any other genre within it, be it drama, sci-fi, fantasy, etc. That's a really, really good point. And yeah, that's a really, really good point. That perhaps seeing horror as a genre, may not really necessarily do it justice, or perhaps it is more like an angle or an aspect or a lens through which to look at a story. And there are many, many different kinds of horror. And I think growing up as a kid, of course, I was attracted to like monster horror. We wanted to see the creature, right? And then that grows into sort of more and more sophisticated levels of horror. And then discovering cosmic horror as a child was so revolutionary because it took the monster out of the equation. I mean, the monster was there, but the point was not the monster anymore. The point was your imagination. Your point was your conceptualization of the monster. The point was what the monster represented rather than what it actually was. And to see horror as a language of existential fear, to me, is very beautiful. It's a language. It has its grammar, it has its syntax, and it expresses something very deep in us. And I mean, H.P. Lovecraft's famous essay on supernatural horror in literature begins by stating that the oldest emotion known to man is fear, and the oldest fear is fear of the unknown. And it's such a profound statement that we are basically at our very core driven by fear. We are fearful creatures in a world that we don't understand and that we cannot control. And the thing that we fear the most is the unknown. And we, and that is why we have structures, traditions. That is why my grandparents become upset if I don't want to confirm my faith in something I never decided to believe in anyway. That was just forced upon me because my parents decided to splash water on my head and say that I was baptized or something. The fear of the unknown, the fear of everything that lies outside it. And I've always been attracted to the unknown. Like, I am an adventurer at heart. I like to travel into the unknown. I love new experiences. I love going outside my comfort zone. I love trying things left, right, center, whatever. And I do it not from a position of bravery, not at all. Like, I think I'm a big coward, actually. I do it really from a position of fear. But to stay at home with that fear and not confront the barriers around you is just somehow, it's not really an option. I have to, I cannot be comfortable in that space. I can be comfortable only by going beyond and really looking that fear in the eye. And I think that is what horror does. And that is where, to cycle back to what Swordvander says, that the genre of horror is not really tied to monsters or haunted houses like we may sometimes end up thinking of it. There are all sorts of horror. There's existential horror, there's relationship horror, there is horror in so many different forms, and it can be injected into any kind of story. But the basic idea that at the heart of everything we do is fear. Like, we are so fearful, and we're just trying to conquer our fear by controlling our reality, by controlling our surroundings. And, fuck control, right? It's like, let yourself loose and just try to exist in that fear. And then you can go places instead of just constraining and demming in everything. Well, so yeah, that was a long rant. I of course meant every word of it, so don't take it lightly. I don't myself. I want to, after having introduced this Mansion of Madness game that I became so enamored with in its ambition, I want to tout my own horn a little bit by saying that what I actually ended up doing was that I made my own design rule for Mansion of Madness. I was like, each scenario in this game should only be played once, so there is no replayability. You can only play it once. I introduced non-player characters. Previously, there were only characters and monsters, which means that every interaction between beings in the game was fight. So I changed that by introducing non-player characters that you could talk with, have dialogues with, and get information from. I introduced physical handouts that you could find. I introduced, instead of, you can see here on this image that the entire map is laid out, so you can see everything in the house, and then you go around to every space in the house, and then you discover what is in that space. But I was like, well, if the people have never been in this house before, how would they know the floor plan? So I also, of course, taking that seriously as well by changing the game into something where you could only see the rooms into which you went. So you kind of explored the game one space at a time. And I know that on this image you're seeing here, it looks like everything is pretty much house. There are also outdoor spaces like gardens and stuff. And I ended up I posted this on Board Game Geek. Is there a link to this rule, Swordbender asks, and of course there is. I just need to tread water a little bit if I'm gonna find them. But let's see. So what I ended up doing was I posted these design rules, and it was kind of a manifest because I loved the game. I loved what the game was trying to do, and I hated its implementation. And so I wrote this set of rules, and there was this one annoying person on Board Game Geek who said like, yeah, sure, you know, you can write what you think other people should do, but like if you cannot do it yourself, then don't write it. And I was like, okay. I took that as a challenge, and I thought, well, okay, hell, you know, I'm gonna try to write it. I'm gonna see if I can do a scenario based on these design principles, or if I'm just gonna break the entire system of the game. And I'm sorry here for just mulling around. Here is something that says contribution. I'm just trying to find a link to these things that I uploaded. Let's see. Yes, files. Here you are. It must have been the first thing. Yeah, I call them the rules of story, apparently. And yeah, they're still here. How wonderful. Like 1,000 downloads. That's pretty good. Let's go here. I'll post them in chat if I can. Copy that. Why can't I post them? Why can't I copy paste anything in this world? Okay. Okay. And right. Yeah. They exist out there, but for some reason I cannot copy paste anything. Rules of story. Thank you, Swordvanda, for finding this document. Great, thank you. And basically, I think from that document, you can probably also find the scenarios I did, because I ended up actually doing 3 scenarios in this system. And it was basically me hacking the system. And the reason that I'm talking about it and presenting it to you now is that, you know, yeah, I'm proud of the stuff I do, but that's not really, I'm proud of the stories that I created in this system, but that's not why I'm telling it. I'm telling it because that we can work with the potential in these games. We can change the potential, and we can make these games be more than they set out to be. And what I did was basically take this Mansion of Madness game and put it more into a direction of an RPG, but it was still played out on the board. It was still a story game. And I think it developed further. And yeah, thank you, Swordvanda. I can see you're posting in the Dark Wood. There is also All Saints Asylum. It's right there. And there is also Little Boy Lost. So thank you for putting those up. Great. Because what happened then was that I made my scenarios, and there was this French group of Mansion of Madness players that were very much into Mansion of Madness, and they created their own scenarios as well and had them layouted and like did fancy handouts and everything. And I was in touch with them, and they ended up basically layouting all my scenarios, which were just Word documents to begin with. And then they ended up, you know, looking like this, like a bit of a brush up with something added on top. This is All Saints Asylum, my first scenario, which is basically about an insane asylum where something has gone awry and the characters are sent to investigate. And it is the first scenario to introduce all these new design elements that I'd written up in my design doc. I ended up being really happy with this game. It's also a scenario which introduces dilemmas in the game, meaning that player characters have really have choices, which is they have story choices in the game. It's not just like whether you want to fight the monster or flee from the monster or go left and right. It's real story choices, and the story choices are pretty brutal at times. I'm not going to spoil here, but there's some really nice choices in there. The next scenario was in the dark wood, basically about a family living in the woods. It was inspired by an old Call of Cthulhu scenario called, it was not called The Hills Have Eyes, but it was called something similar, I think. Anyway, it was about this family who lives in a remote rural area, and things have gone wrong. And it's about the relationship between man and nature, and basically what happens when man gives into nature. This was a scenario that was banned in some countries. I'm kind of proud of that because it was it has like not safe for work material in it. So that's in the dark wood. This is the French edition, as you can see. And then the final scenario was Little Boy Lost, which is, the title is derived from a poem by William Blake. And it was actually, it started out as an attempt at making a story which was supposed to be about the passing of Howard Phillips Lovecraft and how he was on his deathbed, and all these authors that he'd been corresponding with came to his house and were all struggling to get his notes. And then the stories that he had written, they somehow came alive in this house. And I played around with this for a long time, and I couldn't make it work. And in the end, I did something different. And this is another Mansion of Madness scenarios that does pretty radically crazy things. And this was the last one that I made. So I'm really proud and happy about the scenarios. And I am, and I think they show that we can really try to make mechanics more narrative. We can try to make games that really emphasize the theme and the narrative. And even though games are at the heart just mechanical things, at the heart just formal systems, that doesn't mean that we need to understand them or accept them as formal systems only. We can fight against the system. And one of the ways we can fight against the system is that we can insist that the system have a meaning. I mean, this is basically what ethics is, right? Ethics is basically saying like, yeah, the world is mechanical bullshit, and we can either decide, well, and that means that there are no ethics, so we can do whatever the fuck we want, or we can decide, no, we're going to fight against the mechanical nature of the system, and we're going to instill ethics into the system. And we're actually going to, ascribe value, attribute value to the things that we do, to the actions that we take. And if we don't do that, we're just going to be victims of this grinding machine that life really is. So the last couple of photos I want to show you is that I was very delighted when I got some photos sent from a French board gaming convention where some people had actually constructed my scenario of All Saints Asylum, the first one I wrote, in 3D. And you can see here an image of it. They built little houses for it, and there are tombstones in the front where the graveyard was. There's this nice little tree, and there's a well, and they went completely all in and basically built like a 3D model of my scenario, which was just fantastically awesome. And here's another photo from the game later on, where I'm gonna spoil if I explain what this image shows, so I'm not gonna. But you can still see there is this round-shaped thing in the bottom left corner, which is a ritual seal space. But you'll have to try to play those scenarios if you want to have the experience of that. So Mansion of Madness. I made all these scenarios for what was called the first edition. I'm just gonna transition back into my normal space. So I made it for the first edition, and then later came out a second edition, which is an app-driven edition, and that is the version that has conquered everything. So people now play it with this app. I fucking hate the app. I don't like looking at a stream when I play board games. I want it analog. I don't care for digital board games. Yeah, they can help out. They can but they're just it's not immersive for me to have an app telling me what to do or reading out story in a stilted AI voice. I fucking hate that shit. So everything I did is for the first edition. So if you have the first edition, you can play them with them. If you have the second edition, I guess you can also somehow finagle that, but unfortunately, that is where Mansion of Madness ended up. It ended up being a game with an app instead of a game master, because what the first edition did was that, just like in Nightmarehouse, you had a character who played the house or the opposition, and then the players each played a character that was exploring the house or whatever scenario was set up. So that whole trope, which was started in Nightmarehouse to tie this nicely together, really combined and re-emerged some 30 years later in Mansion of Madness, which became one of the best-selling horror board games, and I think rightly so, of all time. It's the best game I know within the genre of horror that works as a crossover between board games and RPGs. It's a fantastic design, and it has so many flaws, but it's so malleable, and it can really generate some truly awesome experiences. So guys, I have been rambling a lot, and I have also played a very short, surprisingly short version of Nightmarehouse, but I think it was intense, and I think we ended up having a story, and I loved how somehow miraculously, or devilishly perhaps, the house was able to reel Kate back into her childhood home and basically make her the face of it and continue itself. Clearly, this was not about the minions in the house. This was the house as an entity that was just controlling everything here, and like everything was planned here. I thought that I had agency in this game. I clearly did not have agency. So Advanta says anything less than 11 hours is a short Nightmarehouse session. That is true, and I'm probably not going to play the full 11-hour experience, but I think I've had a great experience playing this game. I learned so much from engaging with these mechanics, these ideas, everything I've been talking about tonight. I hope that you guys also was able to appreciate the game despite its rules shortcomings. I'm not at all trying to gloss over that. I'm just trying to help people look beyond that and see the potential instead of all the negatives. I love this game to bits, and I really say that honestly. I really love what it's trying to do, and I think it does a lot of it right. And that's pretty much it. I don't know what's gonna be coming up next. I guess I can say that I have a lot of Ares magazine games that has come to me lately, so there may be more magazine games coming. I also got a ton of other weird shit that we can try out. I haven't really decided what I want to do, but I do want to play more Ares games. I played Citadel of Blood before, and now Nightmarehouse. They're all so unique and individual, and they're like no other games that you see out there. Gotta love them for that. All right, guys. It's been great hanging out, and thank you very much for listening in and following along all my ramblings, and for taking this game seriously together with me. I really appreciate that. Let's not laugh it off. Existential horror is real. Swordman is looking forward, and so am I. And with that, I bid you all a good night, and I hope that this helped to relieve you of your Sunday scaries and make you settle in nicely tomorrow, Monday morning, for whatever day awaits you. Thank you, and remember to stop winning, start losing, and stay hopeless.